The sound of a single gunshot tears through Silver Creek like a blade through silk, and everything changes. A woman stumbles into town, blood on her dress, terror in her eyes, begging strangers for mercy she'll never receive. The marshals are coming. The law wants her head. And in a frontier town where survival means keeping your mouth shut, no one dares to help. Until a man who hasn't spoken 3 words in a year steps forward with a lie so dangerous it could destroy them both. This is a story about the price of truth in a world built on lies. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The shot came from somewhere east of the general store, sharp and clean, the kind of sound that stops hearts before it stops bodies. Jasper Colton's hammer froze mid-swing. The anvil rang out its last note into silence. He stood there in the doorway of his smithy, coal dust settling on his forearms, listening to that terrible quiet that follows violence. 3 years in Silver Creek, and he'd learned to read the town's moods like weather patterns. This wasn't the playful crack of boys shooting bottles behind the livery. This was different. This was wrong. The street emptied in seconds, doors slammed, shutters closed. That's how it worked here. Trouble came, people vanished. Jasper had lived enough years on both sides of the law to understand the reflex. He turned back toward his forge, toward the horseshoe glowing orange on the anvil, toward the safe predictability of metal and heat. Then he heard the running. Not the heavy boots of men chasing or being chased, something lighter, desperate, the kind of running that comes when there's nowhere left to go. She appeared at the end of Main Street like something out of a fever dream. A woman in a torn traveling dress the color of dried blood, one sleeve hanging in tatters, dark hair falling loose from pins that had given up hours ago. She ran with the stumbling gait of someone who'd been running too long, her right hand pressed against her ribs, her left clutching something he couldn't see. Jasper watched her scan the empty street, watched her face collapse when she realized there was no one. No help. No mercy. Just shuttered windows and locked doors and the heavy silence of a town that had learned long ago not to get involved. She made it another 20 feet before her legs quit. She went down hard on the packed dirt of the street, catching herself on her palms, her chest heaving. For a long moment she stayed there on her hands and knees, head hanging, hair curtaining her face. Then slowly, painfully, she pushed herself up. That's when Jasper saw the bruises. They painted the left side of her face in shades of purple and yellow, old enough to have ripened but fresh enough to still hurt. Her lip was split. There was dried blood at her temple. And the way she held her ribs suggested damage he couldn't see. She looked up and their eyes met across the distance. Jasper felt something shift in his chest, some long dormant instinct trying to wake up. He crushed it down. He'd learned that lesson the hard way. Getting involved meant getting hurt, meant losing things you couldn't afford to lose. He'd come to Silver Creek to disappear, to become nothing more than the town blacksmith, a man who spoke in grunts and nods and the ring of steel on steel. The woman started toward him, not running now, walking, each step deliberate despite the pain. Her eyes never left his face. "Please," her voice came out cracked, desperate. "Please, I need help. They're coming. They'll kill me, please." Jasper stepped back into the shadow of his smithy. "Don't engage. Don't ask questions. I didn't do it." She was closer now, close enough that he could see the raw desperation in her face, the kind that comes when you've run out of options and time and hope. "Whatever they told you, whatever you heard, I didn't do it. I swear to you, I didn't." The sound of horses cut her off, multiple riders coming fast from the east, the same direction she'd come from. The woman's face went white. She turned, swaying slightly, looking back at the dust cloud rising at the edge of town. When she looked at Jasper again, there were tears cutting tracks through the dirt on her face. "Please," she whispered, "I have nowhere else to go." Jasper felt the old him stirring, the deputy he'd been before everything went to hell, before he'd learned that the law could be bent and broken by men with enough money and the right connections. He shoved it down deeper. "Can't help you," he said. The words came out rougher than he'd intended. "Best move on." "There is no on." Her laugh was bitter, broken. "Don't you understand? This is the end of the line. They've been chasing me for 3 weeks. I've got nothing left. No money, no friends, nowhere to run. So either you help me or you watch them kill me right here in your street." The horses were louder now, close. Jasper could make out individual hoofbeats. "Not my problem," he said, but his hands had curled into fists. "Then whose problem is it?" She took another step toward him, stumbling slightly. "You're the only person in this entire godforsaken town who hasn't slammed a door in my face. You're the only one who's even looked at me. So please, please, I'm begging you." 4 riders burst into view at the end of Main Street, their horses lathered and blowing. U.S. Marshals. Jasper recognized the badges even at this distance, recognized the way they sat their saddles, the particular brand of authority that came with federal commissions. The woman saw them and made a sound like a wounded animal. She turned back to Jasper, and he saw she was shaking. "My name is Violet," she said quickly, the words tumbling out. "Violet Ames. If they take me, they'll hang me. Not because I'm guilty, because I know too much. Because I saw things I wasn't supposed to see. Because I tried to tell the truth, and the truth was inconvenient." The marshals had slowed to a walk, spreading out as they approached. One of them pointed. They'd spotted her. Jasper felt something crack inside him, some wall he'd built brick by brick over 3 years of silence and isolation. He looked at this woman, this Violet, bruised and desperate and shaking with exhaustion, and he saw himself. Saw the moment when he'd been the one running, the one with nowhere left to go, the one who'd learned too late that justice and the law weren't always the same thing. "Damn it!" he muttered. He grabbed her arm. She flinched but didn't pull away, and yanked her into the smithy. The space was small, cluttered with tools and half-finished projects, the forge still radiating heat. There was nowhere to hide her, no back door, no clever exit. "What are you—" she started. "Shut up." He was thinking fast, running through possibilities, discarding them as soon as they formed. The marshals would search the smithy. They'd find her in seconds. Unless— the idea hit him like a hammer to the chest. Insane. Dangerous. The kind of stupid that could get them both killed. But it might work. "Listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Do you trust me?" She let out a half-hysterical laugh. "I don't even know you." "That's not what I asked." Violet looked at him, really looked at him, and Jasper saw her making calculations of her own, weighing her complete lack of options against whatever she could read in his face. "Yes," she said finally. "I trust you." "Then follow my lead and don't say a damn word unless I tell you to." He heard boots hitting dirt outside. Heavy footsteps. The jingle of spurs. Jasper took a breath, said a silent prayer to whatever might be listening, and stepped back out into the sunlight with Violet beside him. The marshals had formed a semicircle in front of the smithy. 4 men, all armed, all wearing the kind of hard expressions that came from years of hunting people for a living. The one in front was older, maybe 50, with a salt and pepper beard and eyes like chips of flint. "Afternoon," the marshal said. His voice was polite, but his hand rested on the butt of his pistol. "We're looking for a fugitive, dangerous woman, wanted for murder and fraud. You seen anyone matching that description?" Jasper felt Violet stiffen beside him. He put his hand on the small of her back, a casual gesture, the kind a man might make with his woman, and felt her trembling. "Depends," Jasper said slowly. "What's she supposed to look like?" The marshal's eyes flicked to Violet, lingered there. Jasper saw the recognition dawn. "Looks exactly like the woman standing next to you," the marshal said. His hand tightened on his gun. "Step away from her, sir. She's under federal arrest." This was it. The moment. Jasper felt time slow down, felt the weight of what he was about to do settle onto his shoulders. 3 years of careful anonymity, of keeping his head down and his past buried, about to be thrown away on a lie so big it might choke him. "Federal arrest?" Jasper let confusion color his voice. "For what? What the hell are you talking about? Step away from her. Now." "I'm not stepping away from my wife." The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Jasper felt Violet's sharp intake of breath, felt the marshal's eyes narrow. "Your wife," the marshal repeated flatly. "That's what I said." Jasper's heart was hammering, but his voice stayed steady. "Violet Colton. We've been married 8 months now, So whatever you think she did, you've got the wrong person. The marshal studied them both, his gaze moving from Jasper's face to Violet's and back again. Jasper could see him calculating, weighing the claim against whatever orders he'd been given. "That's so," the marshal said. "Well then, you won't mind if we ask the lady a few questions, confirm her identity." "I mind plenty." Jasper's voice went hard. "My wife's not answering questions without me present, and she's not going anywhere without a warrant. You got a warrant, Marshal?" The silence stretched. Somewhere down the street, a door creaked open. People were watching now, emerging slowly from their hiding places, drawn by the confrontation like moths to flame. The marshal shifted in his saddle. "We have reason to believe the woman you're calling your wife is actually Violet Ames, wanted in connection with the murder of Clayton Hayes and the theft of government documents. If you're harboring a fugitive..." "If my wife was a fugitive, don't you think I'd know about it?" Jasper cut him off. "We've been living here for months. Ask anyone in town. Hell, ask the sheriff. He's known us since we arrived." It was a gamble. Jasper had barely spoken to the sheriff in 3 years. But the marshal didn't know that. One of the other marshals leaned forward and muttered something. The lead marshal's jaw tightened. "Nevertheless," he said, "I'm going to have to insist." "On what grounds?" Jasper took a step forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Violet. "You've got no warrant. You've got no proof. All you've got is some wild story about a woman who looks like my wife. Well, I've got news for you, Marshal. Lots of women have dark hair and brown eyes. Doesn't make them murderers. Mr. Colton," the marshal's voice had gone cold, "I'm trying to be reasonable here. But if you continue to obstruct federal officers, I'm not obstructing anything. I'm protecting my wife from harassment." Jasper crossed his arms. "Now, if you've got actual evidence she's done something wrong, present it. Otherwise, get off my property." The standoff crystallized. 4 armed marshals against 1 unarmed blacksmith and a terrified woman. Jasper could feel the eyes of Silver Creek on them, could feel the weight of his own stupidity pressing down. This was insane. This was suicide. But he didn't back down. The lead marshal's hand moved to his gun. For a horrible moment, Jasper thought it was about to go sideways, thought he was about to die in the street outside his own smithy for a woman he'd met 5 minutes ago. Then a voice cut through the tension. "Is there a problem here, gentlemen?" Sheriff Tom Brennan emerged from the crowd that had gathered, his hands resting casually on his gun belt, his expression carefully neutral. He was a political animal, the sheriff, the kind who could read a situation and position himself on whichever side seemed most advantageous. The marshal's eyes narrowed. "Federal business, Sheriff. Don't concern yourself." "When federal marshals start threatening citizens in my town, it becomes my business." Brennan's voice was mild but firm. "Now I heard Mr. Colton say you don't have a warrant. That true?" The marshal's silence was answer enough. "Then I'm going to have to ask you boys to move along," Brennan said. "Come back when you've got proper paperwork, and we'll talk. Until then, Jasper and his wife are under my jurisdiction." Jasper nearly laughed at the absurdity of it. The sheriff who'd barely acknowledged his existence in 3 years was suddenly his defender. But he understood the dynamics. Brennan didn't want federal officers throwing their weight around, didn't want to look weak in front of his own town. The lead marshal's face had gone red. "Sheriff, I strongly suggest you follow proper procedure." Brennan's hand had drifted closer to his gun. Behind him, Jasper saw a few of the townsmen quietly arming themselves. Whatever they thought of him, whatever they thought of Violet, this was still their town. Outsiders didn't get to ride in and start making demands. The marshal looked at his men, looked at the gathering crowd, looked at Violet standing there with Jasper's hand still on her back. Jasper could see him doing the math, weighing his options. "This isn't over," the marshal said finally. "We'll be back. With a warrant. And when we are, Mrs. Colton, you're going to have a lot of explaining to do." He wheeled his horse around. The other marshals followed. They rode out of Silver Creek at a gallop, dust rising in their wake. Jasper didn't move until they were completely out of sight. Then his knees nearly buckled. Violet swayed against him, and he caught her automatically, feeling how badly she was shaking. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." "Save it." His voice came out harsh. The adrenaline was draining away, leaving him shaky and cold. We need to talk. Now. Inside. He guided her back into the smithy, acutely aware of the eyes following them, the whispers starting up like wildfire. The damage was done. By tomorrow morning, the whole town would know that the silent blacksmith had a wife he'd never mentioned, a wife who looked an awful lot like a federal fugitive. Inside, away from prying eyes, Jasper let go of Violet and put the width of the forge between them. She stood there swaying slightly, her arms wrapped around herself, looking like she might collapse at any moment. "Start talking," Jasper said, "and don't lie to me. What did you really do?" Violet's laugh was bitter. "You want the truth? The truth is, I was stupid enough to think the law cared about justice. That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters." She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "But if you want the details, fine. My uncle is a land broker, was a land broker, probably still is. His name is Marcus Ames, and he's been running the biggest fraud scheme in 3 territories. Jasper felt something cold settle in his stomach. Fraud scheme. Land titles, forged deeds. He'd bribe officials to register false claims, then sell the same parcels to multiple buyers. Made hundreds of thousands of dollars. Destroyed lives. Families would show up to claim their land only to find out it had been sold 3 times over, their money gone, their contracts worthless. And you found out. I worked in his office, kept his books. I didn't know at first. He was careful, covered his tracks. But eventually I saw the pattern. Too many duplicate sales, too many clerical errors, too much money moving in directions it shouldn't. Violet's voice was steady now, the terror replaced by anger. I confronted him, told him I was going to the authorities. He laughed at me, said I had no proof, said even if I did, he owned half the judges in the territory. So you went anyway. I went anyway. I gathered every document I could find, bills of sale, forged signatures, bribe receipts. I took it all to the federal marshal's office in Denver. Her smile was savage. You know what they did? They arrested me. Said I was the one committing fraud. Said I'd murdered my uncle's partner, Clayton Hayes, when he tried to stop me. Did you? No. The word was flat, final. Clayton was helping me. He was the one who first suspected what Marcus was doing. We were working together to build a case. Then one night, someone shot him in his office and made it look like a robbery. 2 days later, my uncle had me arrested for his murder. Jasper studied her face, looking for signs of deception. He'd gotten good at reading people during his years as a deputy, good at spotting the tells that separated truth from lies. What he saw in Violet's face was exhaustion and fury and a kind of desperate honesty that was hard to fake. So your uncle has the marshals in his pocket, he said slowly. Not just the marshals, judges, land office clerks, half the territorial government. Violet's hands clenched into fists. He's got enough money and connections to make this whole thing disappear, to make me disappear. And everyone who should care, everyone who's supposed to uphold the law, they're all looking the other way. Jasper knew that story. He'd lived it, different details, same corruption. Why didn't you run farther, he asked. Why come here? Because I'm out of options, out of money, out of places to hide. Violet's voice cracked. I thought maybe in a small town, somewhere off the main routes, I could disappear long enough to figure out my next move. But they found me anyway. They always find me. Jasper walked to the smithy door and looked out at the street. The crowd had dispersed, but he could see curtains twitching, could feel the weight of attention. The lie he'd told had bought them time, but not much. The marshals will come back, he said, with a warrant, just like they said. And when they do, my word won't mean anything. I know. Violet's voice was small. You should let them take me. You've already done more than anyone had a right to ask. I won't hold it against you. Jasper turned to look at her. She stood there in his smithy, bruised and exhausted and still somehow defiant, a woman who'd tried to do the right thing and been crucified for it. He thought about the deputy he'd been, the man who'd believed in the law until the law betrayed him. Thought about the oath he'd taken, the promises he'd broken. How much proof do you have? He asked. Violet blinked. What? The documents you took from your uncle. How much did you get? A strange expression crossed her face, something between hope and disbelief. I had everything. But when they arrested me in Denver, they confiscated it all, said it was evidence. I've got nothing left but what I remember. And what you remember could bring down your uncle's operation? If anyone would listen, which they won't, because he owns them all. Jasper felt the old instincts stirring stronger now, the part of him that had become a deputy because he believed in protecting people, in standing between the innocent and those who'd hurt them. He'd buried that part of himself 3 years ago when he learned that good intentions weren't enough, that sometimes the system was too corrupt to fix. But maybe he'd been wrong. Maybe one person could still make a difference if they were willing to risk everything. The marriage story buys us some time, he said slowly. Not much, but some. They'll investigate. They'll dig. And when they realize we're lying, they'll come for both of us. I know, Violet said quietly. I'm sorry. I never should have. But if we can make it stick, Jasper continued, talking over her, if we can make them believe it long enough, maybe we can find another way. Violet stared at him. Why would you do that? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Jasper thought about that, about why he was willing to throw away 3 years of careful anonymity for a stranger, about why her story had hit him like a punch to the gut. Because someone did the same for me once, he said finally, when I had nowhere left to run, and I swore if I ever got the chance to pay it forward, I would. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was true enough. Violet's eyes had filled with tears. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just answer one question. Is everything you told me the truth? Yes. Then we've got work to do. Jasper moved to the door and looked out again. The sun was sinking toward the horizon, painting the street in shades of gold and orange. First thing, we need to make this marriage look legitimate. That means you move into my house. That means we act like a couple who's been together for months. That means we get our stories straight before anyone starts asking detailed questions. Jasper, second thing, we figure out what your uncle's next move will be. He's not going to give up just because the marshals failed once. He'll send more people, better people. We need to be ready. And third? Violet asked quietly. Jasper looked at her, this woman who'd stumbled into his life like a grenade with the pin pulled, and felt something shift in his chest. Purpose. Direction. The thing he'd been missing for 3 years. Third, we find a way to bring the bastard down. The house Jasper lived in sat at the edge of town, a small cabin that had been built by some optimistic settler 20 years ago and abandoned when the reality of frontier life proved harsher than the dream. Jasper had bought it for almost nothing, fixed the worst of the damage, and turned it into something functional, if not comfortable. 1 room for living, 1 for sleeping, a kitchen that barely deserved the name. He'd never brought anyone here. Never wanted to. It was his space, his sanctuary, the place where he could drop the mask of the silent blacksmith and just be himself. Now Violet stood in the middle of his front room, looking around with an expression he couldn't quite read. It's not much, Jasper said, suddenly aware of how sparse everything was. A table, 2 chairs, a shelf with a few books. Nothing on the walls, nothing personal. It's perfect, Violet said softly. It's safe. She swayed then, her legs finally giving out. Jasper caught her before she hit the floor, felt how light she was, how fragile. When was the last time she'd eaten? Slept? Come on, he said, guiding her to the bedroom. You need rest. I can't take your bed. You can and you will. I've slept in worse places. He got her to the narrow cot that served as his bed, helped her sit. When did you last eat? Violet had to think about it. 2 days ago, maybe 3. Jasper swore under his breath. I'll find something. Don't move. He left her there and went to the kitchen, scrounging through his meager supplies. Bread, cheese, some dried meat. He put together a plate and brought it back to find Violet had already fallen asleep sitting up, her head tilted at an uncomfortable angle. For a long moment, he just looked at her. In sleep, the hardness left her face, the desperation. She looked young, vulnerable, like someone's daughter or sister, not a fugitive running for her life. Jasper set the plate on the small table beside the bed and carefully shifted Violet so she was lying down. She murmured something but didn't wake. He pulled a blanket over her, then stood there feeling awkward and out of place in his own bedroom. What the hell had he done? He'd just claimed a complete stranger as his wife, lied to federal marshals, and put a target on his own back. For what? Some half-forgotten sense of justice? The memory of a debt he'd never really owed? Or maybe because when he looked at Violet, bruised and desperate and still fighting, he saw himself. Saw the person he'd been before the betrayal, before he learned that the law could be bought and sold like any other commodity. Jasper left her sleeping and went back to the front room. Through the window, he could see lights coming on across Silver Creek as evening settled in. Somewhere out there, people were talking about him, speculating, wondering why the silent blacksmith had suddenly revealed a wife no one knew existed. He needed a story, a good one, something that would hold up under scrutiny. Jasper sat at his table and started thinking, mapping out the lie that might save both their lives. They'd met in Denver. No, too easy to disprove. Better to pick somewhere smaller, somewhere the marshals couldn't easily verify. Cheyenne. They'd met in Cheyenne 8 months ago. Quick courtship. He'd been working as a blacksmith there. She'd been... what? Working for her uncle, she'd said. A clerk. That wouldn't work. If anyone connected her to Marcus Ames before the marriage, the whole story fell apart. She'd been a seamstress. Simple. Believable. They'd met, fallen in love, gotten married by a traveling preacher. No official record, but that wasn't uncommon on the frontier. Then they'd moved to Silver Creek for a fresh start. It was thin, full of holes if anyone dug deep enough. But it might be enough to create reasonable doubt, to make the marshals hesitate. Jasper was still working through the details when he heard Violet stirring in the bedroom. A moment later, she appeared in the doorway, wrapped in the blanket, her hair tangled and her eyes still heavy with sleep. "What time is it?" she asked. "Near midnight. You slept about 4 hours." Jasper gestured to the plate he'd left. "You should eat." Violet picked up the bread and cheese, eating mechanically, like someone who'd forgotten food was supposed to taste like something. Jasper watched her and felt an unexpected surge of anger at her uncle, at the marshals, at everyone who'd put her in this position. "We need to talk," he said when she'd finished. "Get our story straight. The marshals will be back probably within a few days. When they are, we need to be able to answer any question they throw at us without contradicting each other." Violet nodded, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. "Okay. Where do we start?" "At the beginning. How we met, when we got married, why we came here." Jasper paused. "And we need to talk about the details. The kind of things a husband and wife would know about each other. Favorite foods, habits, the small stuff that makes it real." They talked through the night. Jasper laid out the framework. Meeting in Cheyenne, quick courtship, marriage by a traveling preacher named Silas Woodward, who'd moved on and couldn't be easily located for verification. Violet filled in details about her supposed life as a seamstress, inventing a boarding house where she'd lived, a shop where she'd worked. "We'll say you were running from your uncle even then," Jasper said. "That's why you changed your name when we married, took mine instead of keeping yours. It explains why there's no easy paper trail." "And if they ask why I never mentioned being married before?" "Private man. Didn't talk much about personal business. People here can confirm that. I barely said 2 words to anyone before yesterday." Violet smiled slightly. "That part rings true." They moved on to the smaller details. Jasper's favorite meal was stew. Violet claimed to make terrible coffee but decent biscuits. He snored. She kicked in her sleep, the kind of mundane truths that accumulated in a real marriage. "What about physical affection?" Violet asked, and Jasper saw color rise in her cheeks. "In public, I mean. They'll expect us to act like a married couple." It was a fair question, and one Jasper hadn't fully considered. "We'll keep it simple," he said. "I'm not much for public displays anyway. A hand on your back, standing close, the occasional touch, nothing that would make either of us uncomfortable." Violet nodded, relief clear on her face. "Okay, that works." They talked until the sky started lightening outside, until they'd covered every angle Jasper could think of. By the time the sun came up, they had a story that felt almost real, almost believable. Almost. "There's one more thing," Violet said as dawn broke through the window. "Your past. If the marshals dig into you, they won't find anything." Jasper's voice was flat. "I made sure of that when I came here." "But if they do, they won't." The finality in his tone ended the conversation. Violet looked at him for a long moment, and Jasper could see her wondering, speculating, but she didn't push. Maybe she understood that everyone who ended up in a place like Silver Creek was running from something. "I should get back to the smithy," Jasper said, standing. "People will notice if I'm not there. You should stay here. Rest. Don't let anyone see you yet. We need to control how this story spreads." "Jasper." Violet stood too, the blanket falling away. In the morning light, the bruises on her face looked worse. "Thank you for this, for all of it. I know I keep saying it, but don't." Jasper held up a hand. "We're not out of this yet. Save your thanks for if we actually pull it off." He left before she could respond, stepping out into the cool morning air. Silver Creek was waking up around him, smoke rising from chimneys, early risers beginning their days. Jasper walked through the quiet streets toward his smithy, and with every step he felt the weight of what he'd done settling onto his shoulders. The lie was told. The die was cast. Now they just had to live with the consequences. The smithy was cold when he arrived, the forge dark. Jasper set about building the fire, falling into the familiar routine, trying not to think about the woman sleeping in his bed, the marshals who'd be back, the house of cards he'd built that could collapse at any moment. He was still working the bellows when Sheriff Brennan appeared in the doorway. "Jasper," the sheriff said, "we need to talk." Jasper straightened slowly from the forge, hammer still in hand, and met Brennan's eyes. The sheriff stood in the doorway, backlit by morning sun, his expression unreadable in shadow. Behind him, Main Street was coming alive with the usual commerce of a frontier town, but Jasper could feel the difference in the air, the stares, the whispers cutting off when people thought he might hear. "Sheriff," Jasper said, setting the hammer down with deliberate care. "Something I can do for you?" Brennan stepped inside, his boots scraping against the dirt floor. He was a careful man, the sheriff, the kind who measured every word before speaking, every action before taking it. That caution had kept him alive and employed in a town that chewed through lawmen like tobacco. "That was quite a show yesterday," Brennan said. He picked up a horseshoe from the workbench, turning it over in his hands like he was examining it. "Federal marshals, fugitive accusations, and a wife nobody in this town knew you had. Man's entitled to privacy. Privacy's one thing, lying to federal officers is another." Brennan set the horseshoe down. "So I'm going to ask you straight, Jasper. Is that woman really your wife?" The question hung between them. Jasper could feel the weight of it, the sheriff waiting to see which way he'd jump. Brennan had backed him yesterday in front of the marshals, but that didn't mean he believed the story. It just meant he didn't like outsiders throwing their weight around in his town. "You calling me a liar, Tom?" "I'm asking you a question." Brennan's voice stayed level. "Because if you're harboring a fugitive, that makes you an accomplice. And if you're lying to me, well, that makes us both fools when those marshals come back with their warrant." Jasper moved to the forge, using the time to think, to calculate. He could feel Brennan watching him, reading him the way a good lawman read everyone. "Her name's Violet Colton," Jasper said finally. "We got married in Cheyenne 8 months back. Came here looking for a quiet place to start over. That's the truth." "Colton," Brennan repeated. "Funny how she shares a last name with the fugitive they're hunting. Violet Ames, wasn't it? Lots of Violets in the world?" "Not many with bruises like that." Brennan crossed his arms. "Not many who show up in town running from marshals. You want to explain that part?" Jasper met his eyes. She had trouble in her past, an uncle who didn't take kindly to her marrying without his permission. Rough man. Left those marks before we got out. It was close enough to the truth to sell. Brennan studied him for a long moment, and Jasper forced himself to hold still, to not look away, to play the part of an honest man with nothing to hide. "All right," Brennan said finally. "Let's say I believe you. Let's say she really is your wife and those marshals have the wrong woman. You understand they're going to come back?" "I understand. And when they do, they're going to want proof. Marriage certificate, witnesses, the kind of documentation that stands up in federal court." Brennan paused. "You got that kind of proof, Jasper?" "We were married by a traveling preacher, Silas Woodward. Moved on after the ceremony, didn't file formal papers." "Convenient." "It's the truth." Jasper kept his voice steady. Check with the churches in Cheyenne if you want. Man was real enough, just didn't care much for bureaucracy. Brennan sighed and rubbed his face. You're putting me in a hell of a position here. I stood up for you yesterday because I don't like federal marshals thinking they can ride into my town and push people around. But if you're lying to me, if that woman really is a fugitive, she's not. Then you won't mind if I talk to her, get her side of the story. It was exactly what Jasper had been dreading, but he couldn't refuse without raising more suspicion. He nodded slowly. She's at the house, resting. Those marshals scared her pretty badly yesterday. I'll be gentle. Brennan headed for the door, then paused. One more thing. You've been in Silver Creek 3 years now, kept to yourself. Never mentioned family, friends, a past. Never caused trouble. Now suddenly you've got a wife and federal attention. That's a hell of a change. People change. Maybe. Brennan's eyes were hard. Or maybe they just stop hiding. Either way, Jasper, you better hope your story holds up, because if it doesn't, I won't be able to protect you a second time. He left before Jasper could respond. Through the smithy door, Jasper watched him walk down Main Street toward the edge of town, toward the cabin where Violet was sleeping. His stomach twisted. They'd rehearsed the story all night, built it piece by piece, but talking to each other was different from facing down a lawman's questions. Jasper grabbed his jacket and followed at a distance. By the time he reached the cabin, Brennan was already inside. Jasper could hear voices through the thin walls, muffled but tense. He slipped around to the side window, close enough to listen. Understand this is just routine, Mrs. Colton. Brennan's voice, careful and measured. I'm not here to cause trouble, just want to hear your version of what happened yesterday. There's not much to tell. Violet's voice was steadier than Jasper expected. Those men claimed I was someone I'm not. My husband told them the truth. That's all. The marshals seem pretty convinced you're this Violet Ames woman. You can understand why that's concerning. I can understand that people make mistakes. Doesn't make them right. Good, Jasper thought. Don't give him anything. Stay calm. Tell me about how you met Jasper, Brennan said. Where was it again? Cheyenne. I was working as a seamstress. He came into the shop needing some mending done. We got to talking. And you married him after how long? 3 months. I know it sounds fast, but Violet's voice softened, and Jasper could hear the emotion she was threading through it, making it real. When you've lived the kind of life I have, you learn to recognize good people when you find them. Jasper was kind, patient. He didn't ask questions about my past, didn't judge. He just saw me, the real me. Jasper felt something uncomfortable twist in his chest. The way she said it, she almost believed it herself. Your past, Brennan said. You mind elaborating on that? I had an uncle who raised me after my parents died. Marcus Ames. He was controlling, violent when he drank. When I told him I was leaving to marry Jasper, She stopped, and Jasper heard her voice break slightly. He didn't take it well. That's where the bruises came from. That's why we left so quickly. Why we didn't file formal papers. We just wanted to get away. This uncle of yours, he have anything to do with the marshals showing up? Silence. Then, I don't know. Maybe. Marcus has money, connections. If he wanted to make trouble for me, he could. But I swear to you, Sheriff, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just a woman trying to start over with her husband. The words sounded true. They sounded so damn true that Jasper almost forgot they were lies, built on a foundation of desperation. All right, Brennan said after a long pause. I appreciate your honesty, Mrs. Colton. Just one more question. Those bruises, they look a few days old. You said your uncle gave them to you before you left Cheyenne. But you've been here for months, according to Jasper. That timeline doesn't quite add up. Jasper's breath caught. He'd noticed the bruises, but hadn't thought about the story they told. Fresh violence, recent pain. Violet would need an answer for this. My uncle found us, Violet said quietly. 2 weeks ago, showed up here in Silver Creek. Jasper wasn't home. Marcus, he tried to convince me to come back. Said I'd made a mistake marrying beneath my station. When I refused, he got angry. It was just like when I was younger. The same rage, the same fists. Did you report this to me? To anyone? No, I was ashamed, scared. I thought if I just stayed quiet, he'd leave and never come back. I didn't want to cause trouble. Didn't want people asking questions about my past. And Jasper knew about this? Not at first. He was furious when he saw the bruises, wanted to track Marcus down, but I begged him not to. I just wanted it to be over. It was brilliant. Jasper had to give her credit. She'd taken the hole in their story and turned it into something that actually made sense, that tied everything together. The bruises, the uncle, the reason for secrecy. I see, Brennan said. Well, I'm sorry you went through that, ma'am, and I'm sorry if my questions brought up bad memories, but you understand I had to ask. I understand. If your uncle shows up again, you come find me. I don't care who he is or what connections he has. Nobody lays hands on someone in my town without answering for it. Thank you, Sheriff. Jasper heard footsteps and quickly moved away from the window. He was standing in the front yard when Brennan emerged, trying to look like he'd just arrived. Sheriff, Jasper said, everything all right? Brennan studied him. Your wife's got a hell of a story. Matches yours almost word for word. Because it's the truth. Maybe. Brennan walked past him, then stopped. That uncle of hers, Marcus Ames. He ever shows his face here again, you let me know. Man who beats women deserves what's coming to him. Appreciate that, Tom. Brennan nodded and headed back toward town. Jasper waited until he was out of sight, then went inside. Violet was sitting at the table, her hands wrapped around a cup of cold coffee, shaking slightly. When she saw Jasper, some of the tension went out of her shoulders. I heard, Jasper said. You did good. I almost fell apart when he asked about the bruises. I didn't think... We didn't plan for that. You recovered well. Better than well. The story about your uncle coming here, that was smart. Violet set the cup down. It wasn't entirely a lie. Marcus probably is looking for me. And if he found me here... She stopped, swallowing hard. The bruises would be the least of my worries. Jasper pulled out a chair and sat across from her. In the morning light filtering through the dirty window, he could see how exhausted she still looked, the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands trembled. You should eat something, he said. Real food. I'll go to the general store, get supplies. Is that safe? People will see you. They'll ask questions. Let them. We're married, remember? Man's allowed to buy food for his wife. Jasper stood. Besides, the more normal we act, the more believable this becomes. Can't hide forever. He left her there and walked into town. The general store sat on Main Street between the saloon and the land office, a cramped building that smelled like coffee and sawdust and the vague staleness of goods that had been sitting too long. Martha Hendricks ran the place, a widow in her 50s with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. She looked up when Jasper entered, and he saw the curiosity burning in her face. Morning, Jasper, she said. Heard you had some excitement yesterday. News travels fast. In a town this size? You could have whispered it in your sleep and the whole place would know by breakfast. Martha leaned on the counter. So it's true then. You've got a wife. I do. And here we all thought you were married to that forge of yours. She smiled, but there was genuine interest behind it. When did this happen? How'd you keep it quiet for so long? Jasper had prepared for this. He moved through the store, gathering flour and coffee and dried beans, keeping his movements casual. Didn't see the point in making announcements. We came here for peace and quiet. Figured the less people knew about our business, the better. Well, you certainly got everyone's attention now. Federal marshals and everything. Martha started tallying up his purchases. Those bruises on her face, that from the trouble she was running from? Something like that. Shame. Pretty girl like that. Martha bagged the goods. She settling in all right? Must be strange moving to a new town where nobody knows you. She's managing, Jasper paid, counting out coins carefully. Appreciate you not spreading gossip, Martha. Violet's been through enough. Oh, honey, I don't gossip. I just share information. But her eyes were kind. You tell her if she needs anything, woman things, you know, she can come see me. It's nice having another lady around who's not afraid of a little scandal. Jasper thanked her and left, acutely aware of eyes following him down the street. He passed the saloon, where men were already drinking away their morning, past the land office, where Harold Griggs stood in the doorway watching him with undisguised interest, past the church where Reverend Paul was sweeping the steps and pretending not to stare. This was the gauntlet now. Every person in Silver Creek watching, wondering, trying to decide if his story held water or if they were harboring a fugitive in their midst. Back at the cabin, he found Violet had cleaned up, changed into a spare shirt of his that hung loose on her frame, pulled her hair back. She looked more composed but still fragile, like something that might shatter if handled wrong. "I met Martha Hendricks," Jasper said, unpacking the supplies. "She's the town gossip, but harmless. Offered to help if you need anything. That's kind of her. People are going to want to meet you, to satisfy their curiosity. We should prepare for that." Violet nodded slowly. "How much do I tell them?" "The truth, mostly. Just leave out the parts about fraud and murder." Jasper started making coffee, real coffee this time, strong enough to strip paint. "You were a seamstress in Cheyenne. We met, fell in love, got married. Your uncle didn't approve. We left. Simple story." "Nothing about this is simple." "No," Jasper agreed. "But people will believe simple. They want to believe it. A blacksmith and a seamstress falling in love, making a new start. That's a story they understand. Federal conspiracies and land fraud? That's too complicated, too ugly." The coffee finished brewing and Jasper poured 2 cups. They sat across from each other at the small table, and for a moment there was just silence and steam rising between them. "Can I ask you something?" Violet said finally. "When the marshals were questioning you yesterday, you didn't hesitate. You just lied straight to their faces like it was the easiest thing in the world. How did you do that?" Jasper took a long drink of coffee, feeling it burn down his throat. "Practice. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting." He set the cup down harder than he meant to. "We all have things we don't talk about, Violet. You've got your uncle and his fraud ring. I've got my own ghosts. Let's leave it at that." She looked at him for a long moment, and he could see her trying to read him, to figure out what kind of man would risk everything for a stranger. He looked away first. "Fair enough," she said quietly. "But if we're going to make this work, if we're going to convince everyone we're really married, I need to know something about you. The real you. Not just the story we made up." "Why?" "Because married people know each other. They know how their partner takes their coffee, what makes them laugh, what keeps them up at night. If someone asks me a simple question about my husband and I can't answer it, the whole thing falls apart." She was right. Jasper knew she was right. But the thought of opening up, of letting anyone see the parts of himself he'd buried 3 years ago, it felt like taking off armor in the middle of a battle. "I don't laugh much," he said finally. "I take my coffee black. And what keeps me up at night is my own damn business." "Jasper, what do you want from me, Violet? I'm already lying to federal marshals, hiding a fugitive, putting my life on the line. How much more do you need?" The words came out harsher than he intended. Violet flinched but didn't back down. "I need a partner," she said. "Not a jailer, not a stranger who's doing this out of some misguided sense of obligation. If we're going to survive this, we have to trust each other, and trust starts with honesty." "You want honesty?" Jasper pushed back from the table, anger rising hot and sudden. "Fine. You want to know why I helped you? It's because I used to wear a badge. Deputy Marshal, Territorial Circuit. I believed in the law, believed in justice. Right up until the day I arrested a man for murder and watched him walk free because he had the right friends in the right places." Violet's eyes widened, but she didn't interrupt. "His name was William Garrett," Jasper continued, the words coming faster now, 3 years of silence breaking like a dam. "Rich rancher. Killed his ranch hand over a property dispute, shot him in the back, and left him to bleed out. I had witnesses. I had evidence. I had a confession he made before his lawyer showed up. Should have been the easiest case of my career." "What happened?" "The judge was Garrett's cousin. The prosecutor was on his payroll. The witnesses suddenly couldn't remember what they'd seen. And when I tried to push it, tried to make sure justice was served, I got a visit from my commanding officer. Told me to drop it. Told me some battles weren't worth fighting. When I refused," Jasper laughed bitterly, "they found a way to make me the problem instead of Garrett. Accused me of tampering with evidence, falsifying reports. Gave me a choice. Resign quietly or face criminal charges." "So you ran?" "I resigned. Came here. Started over as a blacksmith, about as far from the law as a man can get. He met her eyes. That's why I helped you. Because I know exactly what it feels like to be on the right side of the truth and still lose. To watch corrupt men use the system as a weapon while everyone looks the other way. Violet was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. I'm sorry that happened to you. Don't be. It taught me an important lesson. The law isn't about justice. It's about power. And people like your uncle, like William Garrett, they have all the power. People like us, we're just collateral damage. You don't really believe that. Why not? It's true. Because if you really believed it, you wouldn't have helped me. Violet leaned forward. You would have let the marshals take me. Would have gone back to your forge and your quiet life and pretended you never saw me. But you didn't. You took a risk. You told a lie that could destroy you. That's not the behavior of a man who's given up on justice. Jasper wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, that he'd only helped out of reflex or guilt or some other empty motivation, but the words stuck in his throat. Maybe I'm just stupid, he said finally. Maybe. Violet smiled slightly. Or maybe you're still that deputy, deep down, still fighting even when the fight seems hopeless. Before Jasper could respond, there was a knock at the door. They both froze. Through the window, Jasper could see a figure standing on the porch, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a long coat despite the warm day. Stay here, Jasper said quietly. He crossed to the door and opened it. The man on the other side was a stranger, maybe 40 years old, with dark hair going gray at the temples and eyes the color of frozen river water. He wore expensive clothes under the coat, city clothes, and his boots were clean despite the dusty street. Everything about him screamed money and authority. Mr. Colton? The man's voice was smooth, educated. I hope I'm not intruding. My name is Thomas Ashford. I'm an attorney from Denver. I was hoping I might have a word with you and your wife. Every instinct Jasper had developed as a lawman started screaming. This was wrong, all of it. About what? May I come in? This isn't really a conversation for the doorstep. Jasper didn't move. My wife's not feeling well. Had a rough few days. Whatever you need to say, you can say it to me. Ashford's smile didn't reach his eyes. I understand she's had some difficulties. That's actually why I'm here. You see, I represent Marcus Ames. I believe that's your wife's uncle. Jasper's blood went cold. Behind him, he heard Violet's sharp intake of breath. Don't know anyone by that name, Jasper said. No, that's strange, because Mr. Ames is quite concerned about his niece, Violet Ames. She went missing several weeks ago under concerning circumstances, and he's been searching for her ever since. Ashford pulled a photograph from his coat pocket and held it up. This is her, isn't it? The woman you claimed as your wife yesterday. The photograph showed Violet, younger and unbruised, standing beside a middle-aged man with silver hair and cold eyes. Her uncle, presumably. She looked uncomfortable in the image, her smile forced. That's my wife, Jasper said carefully. But her name's Violet Colton. Has been for 8 months. Mr. Colton, I'm going to be frank with you. Mr. Ames is a very powerful man with considerable resources. He knows his niece is here. He knows about the incident with the marshals yesterday. And he's prepared to make this very difficult for both of you unless we can reach an understanding. What kind of understanding? Ashford glanced past Jasper into the cabin, clearly trying to see Violet. The kind where you allow me to speak with her directly, to verify her well-being. Mr. Ames is concerned she may be under duress, coerced into this supposed marriage. If that's the case, we can resolve this quietly. No charges against you, no trouble for her. Everyone walks away. And if she's not under duress? If she's exactly where she wants to be? Then we have a different conversation. Ashford's voice hardened. Mr. Ames has filed a complaint with the federal marshal's office. He's provided evidence that his niece was involved in criminal activities, fraud, theft, possibly murder. The marshals who were here yesterday, they'll be back with warrants, lots of warrants. For her, for you, for anyone who's helped hide her. It was a threat wrapped in legal language. Jasper felt rage building in his chest, but kept his voice level. My wife hasn't done anything wrong. Then she has nothing to fear from answering a few questions. Let me speak with her, Mr. Colton. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. No. Ashford's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. Mr. Ames tried to handle this quietly, tried to retrieve his niece without causing a scene, but if you insist on being difficult, get off my property. Mr. Colton, now. Jasper's hand moved to his belt, where a knife hung in a worn sheath. He didn't draw it, didn't even touch it, but the gesture was clear enough. You've said your piece, you've delivered your threats. Now leave before I give you a reason to file charges that'll actually stick. For a moment, Ashford just stared at him. Then he smiled, cold and predatory. You're in over your head, blacksmith. You have no idea who you're dealing with, but you will. He tucked the photograph back into his coat. The marshals will return within 48 hours. When they do, they'll have warrants for both of you, and this time the sheriff won't be able to help. Think about that. Think about whether one woman is really worth throwing your life away for. He turned and walked away without waiting for a response. Jasper watched until he disappeared down the street, then closed the door and locked it. Violet had moved to the window, peering through the gap in the curtains. Her face was pale. That was him, she whispered. Marcus's lawyer. He handles all the dirty work. Bribes, threats, making problems disappear. How much time do we have? He said 48 hours. He's probably telling the truth. Marcus doesn't bluff. He just acts. Violet turned to look at Jasper. We should run, now, before they come back. Run where? They found you here. They'll find you anywhere. Then what do we do? Jasper moved to the small shelf where he kept his few books. Behind them, hidden in a space he'd carved into the wall, was a locked metal box. He pulled it out and opened it with a key he wore on a chain around his neck. Inside were things from his old life. His deputy's badge, tarnished now, a bundle of letters, a photograph of people he used to know. And beneath it all, wrapped in oiled cloth, a Colt revolver and a box of ammunition. We fight, Jasper said. He loaded the revolver with steady hands, muscle memory from years of practice. Violet watched him with wide eyes. You said you had proof, Jasper continued. Documents showing your uncle's fraud. They confiscated them in Denver, but you remember the details, right? Names, dates, land parcels. Yes, but what good does that do? Without the actual documents, we don't need the originals. We just need enough to make someone listen. Someone with more authority than your uncle has money. Jasper checked the cylinder, snapped it closed. You said he bribed local officials, marshals, judges. But he can't have bought everyone. Someone up the chain has to be clean. You want to go to the authorities after everything that's happened? I want to go around the authorities. Over them. The territorial governor, the federal attorney general. Someone far enough removed from your uncle's reach that they might actually care about justice. Violet shook her head. It won't work. Even if we could reach someone that high up, why would they believe us? We're nobodies. He's rich and connected and desperate enough to send a lawyer to threaten us instead of just letting the marshals do their job. Jasper moved closer to her. Think about it. If your uncle really had the law on his side, if his case was solid, why bother with intimidation? Why not just wait for the warrants and let the system work? He's scared, Violet. Scared of what you know. Scared that maybe, just maybe, you could still bring him down. Violet was quiet for a long time. Then, even if you're right, even if we could somehow get someone to listen, we'd need evidence, real evidence, not just my word against his. So we get evidence. How? It's all in Denver, in Marshall's custody. Then we don't get it from Denver. Jasper was thinking out loud now, pieces falling into place. Your uncle's operation, he's still running it, right? Still filing false deeds, taking money from Marks? Probably. He won't stop until someone forces him to. Then the evidence is here, in this territory, in land offices and courthouses, filed under fake names and false claims, but it's there. We just have to find it. That could take weeks, months even, and we've got 2 days before, then we don't look for all of it. Just enough. 1 or 2 cases that are so blatant, so clearly fraudulent that they can't be ignored. Jasper holstered the revolver. You worked in his office. You know how he operates. Where would he file the paperwork around here? What offices would he need to bribe? Violet's mind was clearly racing. The land office in Silver Creek is too small. He'd use the county seat, probably the main office in Centerville. That's about 30 miles east, and he'd need someone in the surveyor's office, someone to falsify the property descriptions. Names? I don't know. He kept that information compartmentalized, but I know the pattern, how he structures the deals, the specific language he uses in the deeds. If I saw the documents, I could recognize them. It was thin, desperate, the kind of plan that had more holes than a rusted bucket. But it was something. "We've got 2 days," Jasper said. "Maybe less. We ride to Centerville, search the land office records, find proof. Then we take it to someone who can actually do something with it. They're watching us now. Ashford. The marshals. We won't make it out of town without being followed. Then we don't leave from town. We leave tonight. Quiet. Take the north trail through the hills, circle around." Violet looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "This is insane." "You have a better idea?" She didn't. They both knew it. "I need to know something first," Violet said. "Why are you really doing this? And don't say it's because someone helped you once or because you used to be a deputy. I need the truth." Jasper took a breath. The truth. What was the truth? That he'd been half dead inside for 3 years, going through the motions of living without actually feeling anything? That helping her had woken something up in him he thought was gone forever? That for the first time since he'd turned in his badge, he felt like he had a purpose? "Because I'm tired of running," he said finally. "Tired of hiding. Tired of letting men like your uncle and William Garrett win, just because they have money and connections. Maybe we can't beat them. Probably we can't. But I'd rather die trying than spend the rest of my life wondering if I could have made a difference." Violet's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." "Probably. And the bravest." She crossed the distance between them and took his hand. Her palm was warm against his, her grip stronger than he expected. "All right," she said. "Let's do it. Let's burn it all down." They left Silver Creek under cover of darkness, 2 horses moving quietly through the north trail while the town slept. Jasper had borrowed the second horse from the livery stable, leaving enough money to cover a week's rental and a note saying he'd be back soon. It was a risk. The stable owner might mention it to the wrong people, but they had no choice. They needed to move fast. Violet rode beside him in silence, wearing men's clothes Jasper had scrounged up, her hair tucked under a hat. In the moonlight, she could pass for a young man if no one looked too close. Another small deception in a web of lies that kept growing more complicated. The trail climbed into the hills east of town, winding through pine and scrub oak. Jasper kept them off the main road, choosing paths he'd learned during his years here, routes used by hunters and prospectors who valued privacy. Behind them, Silver Creek disappeared into the valley, its lights winking out one by one. "How far to Centerville?" Violet asked. Her voice was steady, but Jasper could hear the exhaustion underneath. 30 miles if we take the direct route, closer to 40 the way we're going." He glanced at her. "You holding up?" "I've been running for 3 weeks. What's another night?" They rode for hours, stopping only to rest the horses and drink from a stream that cut through a rocky gulch. Jasper watched Violet splash cold water on her face, watched her straighten her shoulders, and climb back into the saddle despite the pain he knew she had to be feeling. Whatever else she wasn't a quitter. Dawn found them in the low hills above Centerville, looking down at the county seat spread out in the valley below. It was bigger than Silver Creek, maybe 300 people, with actual brick buildings along Main Street and a courthouse that rose 2 stories with a clock tower on top. The kind of place that thought it was a real city instead of just a larger version of the same frontier towns scattered across the territory. "The land office will be in the courthouse," Violet said, studying the layout. "Second floor, probably. That's where they keep the official records." "And how exactly do we get access? Walk in and ask nicely?" "We wait until evening. When the offices close, then we break in." Jasper looked at her. "You've done this before." "Once? In Denver after Marcus fired me. I needed proof of what he was doing, so I went back to his office after hours." Violet's smile was grim. "Got caught by a night watchman. Talked my way out of it by convincing him I'd left my coat behind. But I got what I needed first." "What happened to the documents you took?" "Turned them over to the marshals when I tried to report Marcus, who then turned them over to Marcus's lawyer." Her voice went bitter. Apparently, breaking and entering makes stolen evidence inadmissible, even when it proves a massive fraud conspiracy. They spent the day hiding in a copse of trees on the hillside, taking turns sleeping and watching the road. Jasper couldn't shake the feeling they were being followed, that at any moment Marcus Ames's men would appear on the horizon. But the hours passed quietly, with only the occasional traveler moving along the road below. As the sun started its descent, Violet woke from a fitful sleep. She looked disoriented for a moment, then remembered where they was. Jasper watched her compose herself, watched her push down whatever fear she was feeling and replace it with determination. "Tell me about the documents we're looking for," he said. "Specifically, what makes them different from legitimate deeds?" Violet sat up, rubbing her eyes. "Marcus uses the same pattern every time. He files multiple deeds for the same property under different buyer names, usually within a few weeks of each other. The legal descriptions look similar but have small variations, a few feet different in the boundary measurements, slightly different lot numbers. Individually, they look fine, but when you compare them side by side, you can see they're all describing the same piece of land. And the surveyor's reports? Forged. But good forgeries. Marcus has someone who knows the technical language, knows how to make them look official. The signatures are the weak point. He uses the same fake surveyor name across multiple documents. Check the signature against the official registry, and they won't match." Jasper absorbed this, turning it over in his mind. "So we need to find multiple deeds for the same property, filed close together, with surveyor reports signed by someone who doesn't exist." "Exactly. And we need them from recent transactions, something Marcus is still actively using. If we bring old cases, he'll claim they were corrected, that it was just clerical errors that have since been fixed." The sun touched the horizon, painting the valley in shades of orange and red. Jasper watched the courthouse, watched people streaming out as offices closed for the day. By the time full dark settled, the building was dark except for a single light on the first floor, probably a janitor or night watchman. "Ready?" Jasper asked. Violet nodded. They left the horses tied in the trees and made their way down the hillside on foot, moving carefully through the growing darkness. Centerville's streets were quiet. Most people already home for supper. A dog barked somewhere, but no one paid attention. The courthouse sat on a square of brown grass, surrounded by an iron fence with a gate that wasn't locked. Jasper and Violet slipped through and approached the building from the side, away from the street. The windows on the first floor were too high to reach easily, but Jasper spotted a door near the back that looked like a service entrance. He tried the handle. Locked. Of course. "Can you pick it?" Violet whispered. "Not my area of expertise." Jasper studied the lock. It was old, simple. He pulled out his knife and worked the blade into the gap between door and frame, feeling for the latch. After a few seconds of wiggling, something gave and the door swung open. Inside was a narrow hallway that smelled like floor wax and old paper. The light Jasper had seen came from an office at the far end, door half open, someone humming tunelessly inside. They'd have to get past it to reach the stairs. Jasper pointed to a side corridor and they slipped down it, moving as quietly as possible. The humming continued, oblivious. They found the staircase and climbed to the second floor, each step creaking loud enough to make Jasper wince. The second floor hallway was dark. Violet pulled out a box of matches and struck one, the flare of light momentarily blinding. In the flickering glow, Jasper could see doors lining both sides of the corridor. Most had frosted glass panels with names stenciled on them: county clerk, tax assessor, and at the far end, land office. The match burned down to Violet's fingers and she shook it out. They made their way down the hall by feel, Jasper's hand trailing along the wall. At the land office door, he tried the handle, also locked. "Move back," he whispered. Violet stepped aside. Jasper put his shoulder against the door and pushed. The old wood creaked but held. He pushed harder, putting his weight into it. Something splintered and the door swung inward with a crack that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet building. They both froze, listening. The humming downstairs had stopped. Jasper heard footsteps, someone moving toward the stairs. "Quickly!" he hissed. They slipped inside the land office, and Jasper pulled the door mostly closed behind them, leaving it open just enough that the broken frame wouldn't be immediately obvious. The room was long and narrow, lined with filing cabinets and shelves stacked with leather-bound ledgers. A desk sat by the window, papers neatly arranged on its surface. Violet struck another match and grabbed the nearest ledger, flipping through the pages. These are the deed registrations, organized by date. She ran her finger down a column of entries. We need something from the last 6 months, recent enough that Marcus is still using it. The match went out. She lit another, hand shaking slightly. Jasper moved to the window and peered down at the street. Still empty. But the footsteps downstairs were getting closer. Someone's coming, he said. Almost there. Just give me... Violet stopped. Here. Look at this. She held the ledger open to a page from 3 months ago. Even in the dim matchlight, Jasper could see what she was pointing at. 3 deeds filed within 2 weeks of each other, all for properties in Section 14, Township 3 North, Range 5 West. The legal descriptions were nearly identical. That's Marcus's work, Violet breathed. It has to be. Footsteps on the stairs now. Heavy boots. Jasper heard a voice call out, "Who's up there? Building's closed." "We need to copy these," Violet whispered urgently. "Get the details down." "No time." Jasper grabbed the ledger from her hands and tucked it under his arm. "We take it with us. They'll know it's missing. They'll know someone broke in regardless. Come on." He pulled her toward the window. It was old, the kind that slid up and down. Jasper forced it open, the wood shrieking in protest. Below was a 10-foot drop to the ground. "You've got to be kidding," Violet said. The footsteps reached the second floor. Light spilled into the hallway as someone lit a lantern. Jump or get caught. Your choice. Jasper climbed onto the windowsill. Violet swore under her breath and climbed up beside him. They jumped together, hitting the ground hard. Jasper's ankle twisted and pain shot up his leg, but he forced himself to keep moving. They ran across the square toward the fence, the ledger clutched against Jasper's chest. Behind them, someone shouted from the window, "Hey, stop!" They didn't stop. They hit the fence at a run, Violet vaulting it easily, Jasper scrambling over despite his protesting ankle. A shot rang out, the bullet striking iron somewhere to their left. The night watchman had a gun. They sprinted down a side street, putting buildings between them and the courthouse. Jasper's ankle screamed with every step, but he pushed through it. Behind them, more shouting. Someone was raising the alarm. "The horses!" Jasper gasped. "We need to get to the horses!" They ran through back alleys and between buildings, avoiding the main streets. Centerville was waking up to the commotion, lights appearing in windows, voices calling out questions. Jasper led them in a wide circle, heading back toward the hillside where they'd left their mounts. They were halfway there when 2 men appeared from between buildings ahead of them, blocking the path. Local lawmen, probably, drawn by the gunshot. One of them was already reaching for his weapon. "That's far enough," the man said. "What's going—" Jasper didn't wait for him to finish. He lowered his shoulder and charged, hitting the man in the chest and sending him stumbling backward. Violet darted past the second man, moving faster than Jasper would have thought possible. The man grabbed for her, but she twisted away. And then they were past, running again. More shouts behind them. The pursuit was organizing now, people joining in. Jasper's lungs burned and his ankle felt like someone was driving nails through it, but he kept moving. They reached the base of the hill and started climbing, using hands and feet to scramble up the steep slope. Gunshots cracked behind them. Jasper heard bullets whipping through the brush, but didn't look back. They crested the hill and found their horses right where they'd left them. Thank whatever luck was watching over them. Jasper shoved the ledger into his saddlebag and hauled himself onto his horse, pain shooting through his ankle. Violet mounted more gracefully, and they kicked their horses into motion. The pursuit reached the hilltop just as they disappeared into the trees. More shots, wild and desperate, but Jasper and Violet were already gone, riding hard through the darkness, branches whipping at their faces. They rode for an hour before Jasper finally slowed. His ankle was swollen inside his boot, and every movement sent fresh waves of pain up his leg. Violet looked back at him, her face pale in the moonlight. "Are you all right?" "Twisted my ankle in the jump. It'll hold." He hoped that was true. "We need to get off the main trail. They'll send riders after us." They turned north, following a creek into rougher country. The horses picked their way carefully over rocky ground, while Jasper tried not to think about how many different ways this plan could still fall apart. They had the ledger, but that was just the first step. They still needed to verify the information, find someone in authority who'd listen, and do it all before the marshals showed up in Silver Creek with their warrants. 48 hours, Ashford had said. They'd already burned 12 of them. As dawn broke gray and cold, they stopped in a small canyon where the creek had cut deep into red sandstone. Jasper slid off his horse and immediately collapsed when his ankle gave out. Violet was beside him in seconds, helping him to sit against a rock. "Let me see it," she said. Jasper tried to wave her off, but she was already unlacing his boot. When she pulled it off, they both saw how swollen the ankle was, purple and angry looking. "That needs ice and rest, neither of which we have." Violet looked up at him. "You can't ride like this." "I can ride. I don't have a choice." "Jasper, we're not stopping, not when we're this close." He pulled the ledger from his saddlebag, wincing at the movement. "Let's see what we've got." They sat together in the growing light, the ledger spread open between them. Violet traced her finger down the entries she'd marked, her expression growing more intense as she read. "These 3 deeds," she said, "all filed within 10 days, all supposedly for different properties, but look at the legal descriptions. Section 14, Township 3 North, Range 5 West. The lot numbers are different, but the actual coordinates overlap. It's the same 160 acres sold 3 different times to 3 different buyers. Names of the buyers: John Mitchell, Samuel Harding, Robert Connolly." Violet flipped to another page. "And look at this. The surveyor's signature on all 3 reports, James Whitmore. But I remember that name from Marcus's files. There is no James Whitmore. It's one of the fake identities he uses." Jasper studied the entries, his law enforcement training kicking in. "The dates are the key. If we can show these 3 deeds were filed almost simultaneously for overlapping property, with surveyor reports signed by someone who doesn't exist, it proves fraud. Systematic, deliberate fraud. Exactly the pattern Marcus uses across all his schemes." Violet's hands were shaking with excitement or fear or both. "This is it, Jasper. This is what I needed. Proof that can't be explained away as clerical error or coincidence. We still need to verify the surveyor, make sure James Whitmore isn't registered with the Territorial Surveyor's Office. And we need to find at least one of these buyers, prove they were sold fraudulent property. The Surveyor Registration Office is in Cheyenne. That's a week's ride from here." Jasper shook his head. "We don't have a week. We barely have a day." He thought hard, running through options. "The telegraph office. We can wire Cheyenne, ask them to check their records. It'll take a few hours, but it's faster than riding there ourselves." "And the buyers?" "That's trickier. We'd need to track them down, get them to testify. Most of Marcus's marks probably don't even know they've been defrauded yet. Won't know until they try to claim their land and find out someone else already owns it." Violet's face fell. "So even with this ledger, we might not have enough. Not in time." Jasper hated seeing the hope drain from her eyes. He pulled the ledger closer, scanning the other entries, looking for anything else they could use. Then he saw it. A notation in the margin next to one of the deeds, written in different handwriting than the official entries. "What's this?" He pointed to the note. Violet leaned in. "It's a payment record. See the initials? M.A. Marcus Ames. He documented the bribe right there in the official ledger. The clerk he paid off must have been keeping track for his own records." "How much?" $500. To someone with the initials H.G. Violet's eyes widened. "Harold Griggs. He's the land office clerk in Silver Creek. I saw his name when we rode through town." Jasper felt pieces clicking into place. If Griggs is on Marcus's payroll, he'd know about all the local fraud cases. He might have kept records. Insurance in case Marcus ever tried to cut him loose. "You want to go back to Silver Creek?" "That's insane. The marshals are probably there already, waiting for us. I want to talk to Harold Griggs, find out what he knows and what he can prove." Jasper struggled to his feet, testing his ankle. It hurt like hell, but it held his weight. "If we can flip him, get him to testify about the bribes and the fake deeds, he'll never turn on Marcus. He's in too deep. The moment he admits to taking bribes, his career is over." "Maybe. Or maybe he's scared enough of going down with Marcus that he'll take a deal, testify in exchange for immunity." Jasper limped to his horse. "Either way, we're running out of options. We've got the ledger, but without corroboration, without testimony from someone on the inside, Marcus's lawyers will tear it apart. They'll claim we stole it and falsified the entries. We need a witness." Violet looked at him like he'd lost his mind. And maybe he had. Going back to Silver Creek was suicide, but Jasper couldn't see another path forward. "There's something else," he said. "If Ashford told the truth about the marshals coming back with warrants, they'll arrest everyone in town who helped us. Martha Hendricks, Sheriff Brennan, anyone who vouched for our story. I can't let that happen. Can't let them pay the price for my lie." "So what's your plan? Ride back into town, walk up to a corrupt land clerk and ask him politely to betray his criminal patron?" "Something like that." Violet was quiet for a long moment. Then she laughed, a sound edged with hysteria. "You know what the crazy part is? I actually believe you might pull it off." They rested another hour, long enough for Jasper to wrap his ankle in torn strips of cloth, and for both of them to eat the last of their supplies. Then they mounted up and turned back toward Silver Creek, riding hard despite Jasper's injury. The sun climbed toward noon as they descended from the hills. In the distance, Jasper could see smoke rising from Silver Creek's chimneys, could see the town laid out like a perfect target. They were riding straight into the lion's den, and they both knew it. "When we get there," Jasper said, "you stay hidden. Find somewhere safe and wait. I'll handle Griggs." "Absolutely not. We're in this together." "Violet, no. You don't get to protect me now, not after everything." Her voice was hard. "Besides, I know Marcus's operation better than you. I know what questions to ask Griggs, what pressure points to hit. You need me." She was right, and Jasper knew it. He just didn't want to admit how much danger he was putting her in. They reached Silver Creek from the north, the same trail they'd left by. The town looked quiet, almost peaceful in the midday sun. Too quiet. Jasper's instincts were screaming that something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on what. They left the horses in a grove of cottonwoods outside town and approached on foot. The land office sat on Main Street, a small building wedged between the bank and a dry goods store. Through the window, Jasper could see Harold Griggs sitting at his desk, shuffling papers. "Wait here," Jasper said to Violet. "If this goes wrong, I'm coming with you." "Violet, we don't have time to argue." She was already moving toward the door. Jasper swore under his breath and followed. They walked into the land office together, and Griggs looked up, his expression shifting from boredom to shock in half a second. "Mr. Colton," Griggs stammered, I wasn't expecting—" "We need to talk, Harold." Jasper closed the door behind them and turned the lock. "About Marcus Ames, about the bribes, about all the fraudulent deeds you've been filing." Griggs's face went white. He started to stand, but Jasper moved faster, pulling out the revolver he'd brought from home and setting it on the desk between them, not pointing it at anyone, just making it visible. "Sit down," Jasper said quietly. "And don't do anything stupid." Griggs sat. His eyes darted to the window, probably hoping someone would see and raise the alarm. But Main Street was empty, everyone inside having lunch. "I don't know what you're talking about," Griggs said. His voice shook. "I run a legitimate office, Chatas. If you've got accusations, you should take them to the sheriff. We have the ledger from Centerville." Violet stepped forward and dropped it on the desk. "We know about the $500 Marcus paid you. We know about James Whitmore and the fake surveyor reports. We know everything, Harold." Griggs stared at the ledger like it was a rattlesnake. His hands trembled. "You broke into the Centerville land office," he whispered. "They're looking for you. The whole county is looking for you." "Let them look," Jasper said. "Right now you're going to tell us exactly how Marcus's operation works. Every bribe, every fake deed, every official he's bought, and then you're going to testify to all of it in front of a federal judge." "I can't. If I do that, I'll go to prison. My life will be over." "Your life is already over," Violet said. "The only question is whether you go down with Marcus or whether you save yourself. We can offer you immunity, protection, a chance to start over somewhere else with a clean record. You can't offer me anything. You're fugitives, criminals. Why would I help you?" Jasper leaned forward. "Because Marcus is going to throw you under the wagon the moment things go wrong. You think you're partners? You're not. You're a loose end. And the moment he doesn't need you anymore, he'll cut you loose. Probably blame the whole operation on you while he walks away clean." He could see the words hitting home, see Griggs realizing the truth of it. The man was in his 40s, soft around the middle, the kind who'd spent his whole life taking shortcuts and calling it smart business. Now he was faced with the consequences. Even if I wanted to help, Griggs said, I don't have proof of anything. Marcus was careful. He never put things in writing, never left trails. But you did. Violet pointed at the ledger. You kept records of every payment, every transaction. For insurance, right? In case Marcus ever tried to pin it on you? Griggs's silence was confirmation. Where are they? Jasper asked. The records, the proof. At my house, in a safe behind the bookshelf in my office. Griggs slumped in his chair. But it doesn't matter. You can't use them. Any lawyer worth his salt will get them thrown out as fruit of the poisonous tree. Illegally obtained evidence. Not if you give them to us voluntarily, Jasper said. Not if you come forward as a witness, hand over your records, and testify to what you know. That's called cooperation. That's what gets you immunity instead of a rope. Outside, Jasper heard horses, multiple riders, moving fast down Main Street. His stomach dropped. Violet heard them too. She moved to the window and peered out, then turned back with fear in her eyes. Marshals, she said. At least 6 of them. And Marcus is with them. Jasper's mind raced. They were trapped. The land office had one door and windows that faced Main Street. If they tried to run, they'd be seen immediately. If they stayed, they'd be arrested. He looked at Griggs. The clerk was staring at the window, watching the marshals dismount, watching Marcus Ames step down from his horse like a king surveying his domain. Last chance, Harold, Jasper said. You can help us bring him down, or you can watch him destroy everything you've built and then destroy you. What's it going to be? The marshals were spreading out, surrounding the land office. Someone must have seen them enter, must have sent word. Through the window, Jasper could see Marcus talking to the lead marshal, pointing toward the building. Griggs looked at the ledger, at the gun on the desk, at Jasper and Violet standing there with nowhere left to run. Then he looked at Marcus Ames, the man who'd corrupted him, who'd turned him into a criminal, who'd hung his future on a thread that could be cut at any moment. All right, Griggs whispered. I'll do it. I'll testify, but you have to promise me immunity, protection, a new start. I promise, Jasper said, knowing he had no authority to make that promise, knowing he was lying just like he'd been lying about everything else. But sometimes lies were all you had. The door rattled. Someone was trying the lock. U.S. Marshals, a voice boomed from outside. Open up! Jasper looked at Violet. She looked back at him, and in her eyes he saw everything they'd been through, everything they'd risked, everything that was about to come crashing down around them. Open the door, Jasper said to Griggs. Let them in. Griggs stared at him like he'd gone insane. They'll arrest you, both of you. I know. Jasper picked up the ledger and tucked it inside his jacket. But they're going to do that anyway. At least this way we control how it happens. The door rattled again, harder this time. We need to get you out of here, Violet said urgently. There's got to be a back way. There isn't. And even if there was, where would we go? Jasper took her hand. We've been running since the moment you stumbled into town. Maybe it's time we stopped running and started fighting. They'll kill me, Violet whispered. The moment Marcus gets me alone, the moment there are no witnesses. Then we make sure there are always witnesses. Jasper squeezed her hand. I'm not letting them take you without a fight, and I'm not letting Marcus win. The door shook on its hinges. Someone was putting their shoulder into it. Jasper looked at Griggs. When they come through that door, you tell them everything, right there in front of everyone. The bribes, the fake deeds, all of it. You do that, and I'll make sure you get your immunity. And if I don't, then we all go down together and Marcus walks away clean. Your choice, Harold. The door crashed open and marshals flooded in, guns drawn. Jasper raised his hand slowly, making no sudden moves. Beside him, Violet did the same. The lead marshal, the same one from their first encounter, pushed through the crowd of lawmen, his face hard with triumph. Behind him came Marcus Ames, silver-haired and distinguished, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Jasper made in a year. His eyes locked on Violet with an expression of pure hatred. Well, Marcus said softly, there's my wayward niece. I've been so worried about you, dear. Don't touch her, Jasper said. Or what? You'll shoot me with a gun you're not even holding? Marcus smiled. It's over, Mr. Colton. Your little charade is finished. The marshals have warrants for both of you, multiple charges. You're going to spend the rest of your life in prison, if you're lucky. I'm not the one who's going to prison, Jasper said. He pulled the ledger from his jacket and held it up for everyone to see. This is the official record from the Centerville Land Office. It documents multiple instances of fraud, the same property sold to multiple buyers through falsified deeds and fake surveyor reports. And it includes a notation showing that Marcus Ames paid Harold Griggs $500 to process those fraudulent documents. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. That's absurd. You broke into a federal building and stole records, then fabricated evidence. No court will— I didn't fabricate anything, Griggs said. Every head in the room turned toward the land clerk. He was standing now, his hands shaking, but his voice steady. I took money from Marcus Ames, Griggs continued. $500 to process fake deeds. And that wasn't the only time. He's been paying me for 2 years to file fraudulent property claims. I have records of every transaction, every bribe, names, dates, amounts. It's all documented. Marcus's face went dark. Harold, think very carefully about what you're saying. You're implicating yourself in serious crimes. I'm done protecting you, Griggs said. I'm done being your accomplice. These people are offering me immunity in exchange for testimony. I'm taking it. You can't offer him immunity, Marcus snarled at Jasper. You have no authority. But I do, said a new voice from the doorway. Everyone turned. A man stood there, tall and gray-haired, wearing a long coat with a badge pinned to his lapel. A badge Jasper recognized. A federal judge's star. Judge Thornton, the lead marshal said, surprise clear in his voice. Sir, we weren't expecting— I was on the circuit in Centerville when I heard about the break-in at the land office, Judge Thornton said, stepping into the room. His eyes swept over the scene, taking in everything. I also received a very interesting telegraph from the Territorial Surveyor's office in Cheyenne. Seems there's no record of a surveyor named James Whitmore ever being licensed in this territory. Yet his name appears on multiple property surveys filed in this county. Marcus's lawyer, Ashford, pushed forward. Your Honor, if I might explain— You'll have your chance to explain in court, Mr. Ashford, as will your client. Judge Thornton's gaze settled on Marcus. Mr. Ames, I'm placing you under investigative custody pending a full inquiry into allegations of land fraud, bribery of public officials, and conspiracy. Marshal, secure him, please. This is outrageous, Marcus said, but his voice had lost its confidence. I'm a respected businessman. You can't just arrest me based on the word of criminals and thieves. I can, and I am. Judge Thornton turned to Griggs. Mr. Griggs, you've offered to cooperate with this investigation. Yes, Your Honor. Then you'll be placed in protective custody until we can arrange formal testimony. If your information proves credible, and if you cooperate fully, the Territorial Attorney General will consider immunity. Griggs nodded, relief flooding his face. The marshals moved forward to secure Marcus, who finally seemed to realize he'd lost control of the situation. He looked at Violet with pure venom. You stupid girl, he hissed. You've destroyed everything. Everything I built. For what? For justice? There's no such thing. There's only power. And you just threw away the only power you ever had. I threw away nothing, Violet said quietly. You took everything from me a long time ago. I'm just taking it back. As the marshals led Marcus out, Judge Thornton turned to Jasper and Violet. His expression was grave. You two are in serious trouble, he said. Breaking and entering, theft of official records, possibly obstruction of justice. I can't just ignore those crimes, even if your intentions were good. Jasper's heart sank. They'd won. Marcus was arrested, the fraud exposed. But they were still going to pay the price. However, Judge Thornton continued, I'm inclined to be lenient given the circumstances. If you're willing to testify to everything you witnessed, everything you uncovered, and if you cooperate fully with the investigation, I'll recommend the charges against you be reduced to misdemeanors with suspended sentences. And Violet? Jasper asked. The murder charge? The warrants from Denver? We'll be reviewing those thoroughly. Based on what I've seen so far, I suspect those charges were fabricated by Mr. Ames to silence his niece, but we'll need to investigate properly. In the meantime, Mrs. Colton will remain free on her own recognizance. Violet let out a shaky breath. Jasper felt something loosen in his chest, some weight he'd been carrying since the moment he'd first lied to the marshals. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said. Judge Thornton studied them both. "Don't thank me yet. You two have a long road ahead, trials, testimony, and a whole lot of explaining to do about this supposed marriage." He walked out, leaving Jasper and Violet standing in the wrecked land office surrounded by marshals and the ruins of their desperate plan. "Is it really over?" Violet whispered. Jasper looked at her, bruised, exhausted, but finally safe. "I think maybe it is." One of the marshals cleared his throat. "We're going to need both of you to come with us. Give formal statements. The judge might be inclined toward leniency, but we still need to follow procedure." Jasper nodded. As they were led outside, he saw the entire town of Silver Creek gathered in the street, watching. Sheriff Brennan stood at the front of the crowd, his expression unreadable. Martha Hendricks was there too, her hand over her mouth, and dozens of others all staring at the spectacle. Jasper met Brennan's eyes and saw something that might have been respect, or maybe just relief that the whole mess was finally over. They were taken to the sheriff's office and separated for questioning. Jasper spent hours recounting everything, from the moment Violet stumbled into town to the break-in at Centerville to the confrontation with Griggs. He left nothing out, knowing that lies would only make things worse now. When they finally let him rest, it was dark outside. A deputy brought him food and water, and Jasper ate mechanically, too tired to taste anything. The door opened and Violet was brought in. She looked as exhausted as he felt, but there was something different in her face, something lighter. "They're dropping the murder charge," she said. "Judge Thornton found evidence that Clayton Hayes' death was actually carried out by one of Marcus's enforcers. They have a witness who's willing to testify." "That's good. That's really good." Violet sat down across from him. "Jasper, about us, about the marriage. We're going to have to tell them the truth, that it was a lie, that we barely knew each other." "I know." "We'll probably face charges for that too. Lying to federal officers, obstruction." "I know." She reached across the table and took his hand. "I'm sorry I dragged you into this. Sorry for all of it. You should have let the marshals take me that first day." Jasper looked at their joined hands, thinking about everything that had happened, everything they'd been through together, the lies and the fear and the desperate race against time, the moment when she'd trusted him enough to tell the truth, the moment when he'd decided to fight instead of hide. "I'm not sorry," he said. Violet's eyes widened. "You're not?" 3 years I spent in this town, hiding from my past, pretending to be someone I wasn't. You know what I realized? I was already lying, every day, lying about who I used to be, what I used to believe in. At least this lie meant something. At least it helped someone. We could both still go to prison. Maybe. But we took down a corrupt land baron and exposed a fraud scheme that's been hurting people for years. That's got to count for something. Violet smiled through tears. "You're insane, oh, you know that?" "Yeah," Jasper said. "I'm starting to figure that out." The door opened again and Judge Thornton entered, looking tired but satisfied. "I've reviewed the statements from both of you, as well as the evidence provided by Mr. Griggs. I've also had a very interesting conversation with the Territorial Attorney General." Jasper and Violet waited. "Here's what's going to happen," Judge Thornton said. "You'll both testify at Marcus Ames's trial. Full and complete testimony about everything you witnessed and uncovered. In exchange, the Territory will drop all charges related to the break-in at Centerville and the theft of the ledger. You'll also face reduced charges for making false statements to federal officers, misdemeanor offenses with suspended sentences and probation." "And the marriage?" Violet asked quietly. "That's complicated. Technically, you did commit fraud, but given the coercive circumstances, the immediate threat from the marshals, the fear for Mrs. Colton's life, I'm inclined to view it as a justifiable deception. The charges will be dropped entirely." Jasper felt relief wash over him. "Thank you, Your Honor." "Don't thank me yet. You're both going to be under intense scrutiny during the trial. Marcus Ames has powerful friends and expensive lawyers. They're going to try to tear you apart on the stand. They're going to question your character, your motives, everything you've ever done. It won't be pleasant." "We can handle it," Violet said. Judge Thornton looked at them both for a long moment. "You know, in 30 years on the bench, I've seen a lot of people do terrible things in the name of self-interest. It's rare to see someone risk everything for the right reasons. You two did something remarkable. Foolish and reckless, yes, but remarkable. He left them there, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Jasper and Violet were alone. "So what happens now?" Violet asked. "Now we see it through. We testify. We make sure Marcus pays for what he did." Jasper paused. "And then we figure out what comes after." "After," Violet repeated. "I haven't thought that far ahead. Haven't let myself hope there would be an after." "There will be. It might not look like what we imagined, but there will be something." They sat in the quiet sheriff's office, holding hands across the table, two people who'd been strangers a few days ago and now were bound together by shared lies and dangerous truths. Outside, Silver Creek settled into night. The town that had watched them with suspicion and fear would now watch them become something else. Heroes, maybe. Or fools. Probably both. But the quiet didn't last. It never did. The next morning brought a telegram from the territorial capital. Judge Thornton opened it in front of Jasper and Violet, his expression darkening as he read. When he looked up, there was concern in his eyes. "Marcus Ames has retained Richard Calloway as his defense attorney," Thornton said. "You know that name?" Jasper didn't, but Violet's face went pale. "He's the best trial lawyer in 3 territories," she said quietly. "Marcus used him before to make problems disappear. He's never lost a case." "Never is a strong word," Thornton said, but he didn't sound convinced. "He's already filed motions to suppress the ledger as evidence, claims it was obtained illegally, that the chain of custody is compromised, that you two are unreliable witnesses with criminal records who fabricated the entire scheme to cover your own crimes." "That's insane," Jasper said. "We have Griggs's testimony. We have the documents, which you stole from a government building after breaking in at night. Calloway is going to argue that anything you touched is tainted, that Griggs was coerced into cooperating, that the whole investigation is built on illegal actions by 2 desperate fugitives trying to save themselves." Thornton set the telegram down. "He's not wrong from a legal standpoint. The methods you used, however noble the intentions, they complicate things." Violet stood abruptly and walked to the window. Jasper could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands clenched and unclenched. "So Marcus walks," she said, "just like I knew he would, just like he always does." "Not necessarily. We still have a strong case, but it's going to come down to the trial, to what happens in that courtroom. And Calloway is going to do everything in his power to destroy both of you on the stand." Thornton looked at them seriously. "You need to be prepared for that, for questions about your relationship, your past, your motivations. He's going to make you look like criminals and liars." "We are criminals and liars," Jasper said flatly. "We broke into a land office. We stole government property. We lied to federal marshals about being married. He won't have to work hard to make that case." "Then you'll need to make the jury understand why you did those things. Make them see that sometimes breaking the law is the only way to uphold justice." Thornton stood. "The trial starts in 2 weeks. That gives us time to prepare your testimony, to shore up the weak points in our case. But I won't lie to you. This is going to be difficult. Calloway is going to come at you with everything he has." After Thornton left, Jasper and Violet sat in heavy silence. Through the window, they could see Silver Creek going about its business. Life continued whether you wanted it to or not. "I should leave," Violet said finally. "Get out of the territory before the trial. They can't make me testify if they can't find me. They'll drop the charges against you, send the marshals after you again. Maybe, but at least you'd be safe. You could say I coerced you, that you were helping me under duress. With me gone, Calloway has no one to attack except Marcus." Jasper moved to stand beside her at the window. "Is that what you want? To run again?" "I don't know what I want anymore." Her voice cracked. "I thought exposing Marcus would be enough. Thought justice would prevail if I could just get the truth out there. But it's not that simple, is it? The truth doesn't matter if the right lawyer can twist it into something else." "The truth always matters." "Does it?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like Marcus is going to walk free while we get torn apart in court. The man who destroyed lives, who corrupted officials, who had his own partner murdered, he gets a fancy lawyer and a fair trial. Meanwhile, we get labeled as criminals for trying to stop him. Jasper understood the bitterness in her voice. He'd felt it himself 3 years ago when William Garrett walked free. That sense of the world being fundamentally broken, of the scales of justice being permanently tipped in favor of those with money and power. "You're right," he said. "It's not fair. It's not just. But running won't fix that. It'll just mean Marcus wins completely. Is that what you want?" Violet was quiet for a long moment. "No," she said finally. "No, I want to watch him pay for what he's done. I want to stand in that courtroom and tell everyone exactly what kind of man he is, even if it destroys me, especially if it destroys me." Over the next 2 weeks, they prepared for the trial with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Judge Thornton brought in the territorial prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine Marsh, who peppered them with questions for hours at a time, probing for weaknesses, testing their stories against each other. "Calloway is going to ask about your marriage," Marsh said during one session. "Every detail, how you met, when you married, why you kept it secret. He's going to try to prove you're lying, that Violet is really the fugitive Violet Ames, and you're just an accomplice helping her hide." "We already admitted the marriage was a lie," Jasper said. "Yes, but Calloway will use that to undermine everything else you say. If you lied about one thing, why should the jury believe anything else? We need a narrative that makes sense, that makes your actions understandable, even sympathetic." They worked on that narrative, shaping it, refining it. Jasper had helped Violet because he recognized her situation as similar to his own past persecution by corrupt officials. Violet had lied about her identity because she was terrified and desperate. Together, they'd uncovered evidence of real crimes, crimes that needed to be prosecuted regardless of the methods used to expose them. It was true enough, but Jasper could see the holes in it, the places where Calloway would dig his claws in. Between preparation sessions, they stayed in Silver Creek under the watchful eyes of Sheriff Brennan. Technically, they were free, but there was an understanding that they wouldn't leave town. The cabin became their prison and sanctuary, the place where they'd hidden that first night, now the place where they waited for judgment. Martha Hendricks visited one afternoon, bringing food and gossip in equal measure. "The whole territory is talking about this trial," she said, unpacking a basket of bread and preserves. "Newspapers from Denver to Cheyenne running stories about the land fraud scheme. Some are calling you two heroes. Others are calling you criminals. A lot of people can't figure out which." "What do people here think?" Violet asked. Martha considered that. "Mixed feelings. Some folks lost money to Marcus's schemes over the years. They're glad to see him facing justice. Others think you two caused more trouble than you solved, and a few are just enjoying the scandal." She smiled. "But I'll tell you this. Most people in Silver Creek are rooting for you. You stood up when it mattered. That counts for something." After she left, Violet sat at the table picking at the bread without eating it. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Helping me that first day?" Jasper thought about that, about how his life had been before she stumbled into it, quiet, safe, empty. About how it was now, complicated, dangerous, alive. "No," he said. "I don't regret it. Not even when we're about to get torn apart by the best lawyer in the territory? Not even then." She looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Why not?" "Because for the first time in 3 years, I feel like I'm doing something that matters. Fighting for something worth fighting for. I forgot what that felt like." "Even if we lose?" "Even if we lose." The trial began on a Monday morning in late September. The courthouse in Centerville was packed, every seat filled, people standing in the aisles and spilling out into the hallway. Jasper had never seen so many people gathered for anything that wasn't a hanging. Marcus Ames sat at the defense table looking composed and distinguished, his silver hair perfectly combed, his suit immaculate. Richard Calloway sat beside him, a lean man in his 50s with the predatory stillness of a wolf watching sheep. Behind them sat Thomas Ashford and 2 other attorneys, a small army of legal expertise arrayed against the single prosecutor. Judge Thornton presided from the bench, his expression stern. The jury box held 12 men. No women, Jasper noted with frustration, mostly ranchers and businessmen, the kind who might sympathize with a successful land broker being attacked by desperate criminals. Catherine Marsh laid out the prosecution's case methodically. She presented the ledger from Centerville showing the duplicate deeds. She called the territorial surveyor who testified that James Whitmore didn't exist in any official registry. She presented documents that Harold Griggs had provided showing years of fraudulent transactions. Griggs himself took the stand on the second day. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks, his face gray and his hands shaking, but his testimony was clear and damning. Marcus Ames paid me to process fraudulent land deeds, Griggs said. He would provide me with surveyor reports that I knew were fake, with buyer information that was often fabricated or stolen. I would file them as legitimate transactions and split the proceeds with him. How many such transactions took place? Marsh asked. Dozens, maybe hundreds over the years. I didn't keep count of all of them. And why did you agree to participate in this fraud? Griggs looked at his hands. Because he paid well. Because I was in debt. Because I was weak and stupid and thought I'd never get caught. Calloway's cross-examination was surgical. He walked Griggs through every detail of his criminal history, every bribe he'd taken, every false document he'd filed. By the time he was done, Griggs looked like exactly what he was, a corrupt official trying to save himself by betraying his partner. You're facing serious criminal charges yourself, aren't you, Mr. Griggs? Calloway asked. Yes. And you were offered immunity in exchange for your testimony against my client? Yes. So you have every reason to lie, to exaggerate, to implicate an innocent man if it means saving yourself from prison. I'm not lying. Of course you'd say that. A man facing 20 years in federal prison would say anything to save his skin, wouldn't he? Marsh objected, but the damage was done. Jasper could see it in the jury's faces, doubt creeping in, suspicion that maybe Griggs was just a desperate criminal pointing fingers. Violet testified on the third day. She wore a simple dress that Martha had lent her, her hair pulled back, the bruises on her face finally faded to yellow shadows. She looked young and vulnerable and terrified, which Jasper supposed was the point. Marsh led her through her story gently, working in Marcus's office, discovering the fraud, going to the authorities only to be arrested herself, running for her life with nowhere left to turn. And when you arrived in Silver Creek, what happened? I was desperate, scared. The marshals were chasing me, and I knew if they caught me, my uncle would make sure I disappeared. Then I saw Jasper standing in front of his smithy, and something made me ask him for help. Why did you trust him? I didn't have a choice. He was the only person who didn't slam a door in my face, the only person who looked at me like I was human instead of a criminal. Violet's voice strengthened. And when the marshals came, when they were about to take me, he stood between us. He lied to federal officers to protect me, risked everything for a stranger. Why do you think he did that? Because he's a good man who saw someone in trouble and chose to help, that's all. It was effective testimony, Jasper thought, emotional without being manipulative. But he could see Calloway taking notes, his expression thoughtful, already planning his attack. When Calloway stood for cross-examination, the temperature in the courtroom seemed to drop. Miss Ames, he began, deliberately using her unmarried name, you claim you discovered your uncle's fraud scheme while working in his office. Is that correct? Yes. And how long did you work there? 2 years? 2 years. During which time you processed documents, managed accounts, kept records? Isn't that right? Yes. So for 2 years you were an active participant in this supposed fraud scheme, processing false deeds, managing money that you claim was obtained illegally, facilitating every transaction. I didn't know what I was doing at first, but you eventually figured it out. And when you did, what did you do? Did you go to the authorities immediately? Violet hesitated. No. How long did you wait, Miss Ames? How long did you continue working for your uncle, processing his fraudulent documents before you finally decided to report him? 6 months. 6 months. Calloway let that hang in the air. 6 months during which you continued to benefit from your uncle's illegal activities, collected a salary, lived in his house, accepted his money. Does that sound like the behavior of an innocent victim? I was scared. Or were you simply angry that your uncle caught you stealing from him? That he was about to fire you for embezzlement, and you decided to strike first by fabricating this elaborate fraud scheme? That's not what happened, isn't it? You have a history of deception, Miss Ames. You lied to federal marshals about your identity. You fabricated an entire marriage to avoid arrest. You broke into a government building and stole official records. Why should this jury believe anything you say? Marsh objected repeatedly, but Calloway was relentless. He painted Violet as a scorned employee seeking revenge, a criminal who'd created an elaborate frame-up to cover her own crimes. By the time he finished, Violet was pale and shaking, and Jasper could see doubt spreading through the jury box. Jasper testified on the fourth day, and if Calloway had been hard on Violet, he was merciless with Jasper. Mr. Colton, you claim you were a deputy marshal before coming to Silver Creek. Is that correct? Yes. And why did you leave that position? Jasper had known this was coming, but it still felt like taking a punch to the gut. I resigned. Under pressure, correct? After being accused of tampering with evidence and falsifying reports? The accusations were false, made by a corrupt commanding officer protecting a wealthy killer. That's your version of events, but the fact remains, you were forced to resign from law enforcement under a cloud of suspicion. You came to Silver Creek to hide from your past, to reinvent yourself as a simple blacksmith so no one would ask difficult questions. I came here to start over. And when Miss Ames arrived, desperate and wanted by federal authorities, you saw an opportunity, a woman who needed help and would be grateful enough to do whatever you asked. Isn't that right? No, I helped her because it was the right thing to do. The right thing? Is it the right thing to lie to federal officers, to harbor a fugitive, to break into government buildings and steal official records? Calloway moved closer to the witness stand. Or did you see a chance to play hero, to relive your glory days as a lawman by manufacturing a crime to solve? I didn't manufacture anything. The fraud is real. The evidence is real. Evidence you obtained illegally. Evidence you tampered with. Evidence that conveniently supports your elaborate story about helping an innocent woman while ignoring the simpler explanation that you're a disgraced former lawman trying to regain relevance by inventing a conspiracy. It went on like that for hours. Calloway picked apart every inconsistency, every questionable decision, every moment where Jasper's actions could be interpreted as those of a desperate man rather than a righteous one. By the time he was dismissed, Jasper felt like he'd been flayed alive. That night, back in Silver Creek, they sat in the cabin and didn't speak for a long time. The trial would continue for another week at least. More witnesses, more evidence, more opportunities for Calloway to tear them apart. But today had been the worst of it, Jasper thought. The moment when their own testimony had been turned against them. We're going to lose, Violet said quietly. We don't know that. I saw the jury's faces. They think we're liars, criminals. Everything Calloway said we are. Some of them, maybe. Not all. Jasper, be realistic. Marcus has the better lawyers, the better case. We have stolen evidence and testimony from confessed criminals. How is that supposed to convince anyone? Jasper didn't have a good answer for that. He'd been asking himself the same question. I'm sorry, Violet said. I'm sorry I dragged you into this. Sorry your name is getting destroyed right alongside mine. You deserved better. I made my own choices. Choices you wouldn't have made if I hadn't come stumbling into your town, begging for help. Maybe. Jasper looked at her across the dim room. Or maybe you gave me an excuse to stop hiding, stop running from who I used to be. I'm not sorry for that. The trial continued through another week of testimony. Catherine Marsh brought in victims of Marcus's schemes, families who'd lost their savings buying land that turned out to be worthless, farmers who'd been driven off property they thought they owned legally. Their stories were heartbreaking and damning, but Calloway countered each one by suggesting they were simply unlucky investors who'd made bad deals, that their losses were the result of honest mistakes rather than deliberate fraud. He presented character witnesses who testified to Marcus's reputation as a respected businessman. He brought in other land brokers who claimed the duplicate deeds were common clerical errors that happen in any large operation. Slowly, methodically, he built a case that Marcus Ames was at worst careless and at best the victim of a vindictive niece and a disgraced lawman looking for redemption. Judge Thornton did what he could to keep things fair. He sustained objections when Calloway went too far. He made sure the jury heard all the evidence. But even Thornton couldn't change the fundamental problem. The case against Marcus was built on a shaky foundation of illegally obtained evidence and testimony from people with every reason to lie. On the final day of testimony, Marcus himself took the stand. He was calm, articulate, convincing. He painted himself as a businessman who'd trusted the wrong people, who'd been betrayed by a clerk he'd treated like family. "I loved Violet like a daughter," Marcus said, his voice breaking slightly. "When her parents died, I took her in, gave her a home, an education, a job. And this is how she repays me, with lies and accusations designed to destroy everything I've built." Did you ever pay Harold Griggs to file fraudulent deeds?" Calloway asked. "Never. Mr. Griggs was my employee. I trusted him to do his job honestly. If he was taking bribes or filing false documents, he did so without my knowledge." "And the duplicate deeds found in the Centerville ledger?" "Clerical errors. Unfortunate but not uncommon in a large operation. I've already offered to make restitution to any buyers who were affected." "Do you know why your niece would fabricate these charges against you?" Marcus sighed heavily. "I caught her embezzling from the company. When I confronted her, she became violent, threatened to ruin me if I turned her into the authorities. I didn't want to believe she'd actually do it, but..." He gestured at the courtroom. "Here we are." It was a masterful performance. Jasper watched the jury and saw several of them nodding in sympathy. Catherine Marsh's cross-examination tried to shake his story, but Marcus was unflappable. He had an answer for everything, an explanation for every inconsistency. By the time he stepped down, he looked like exactly what he claimed to be: a successful businessman wrongly accused by bitter enemies. Closing arguments took most of the next day. Marsh gave it everything she had, walking the jury through the evidence, connecting the dots, showing how the pattern of fraud was too consistent to be accidental. She pointed to the victims, to the ruined families, to the systematic nature of the scheme. "This wasn't a series of mistakes," she said. "This was a deliberate, calculated fraud carried out over years. And Marcus Ames was at the center of it. Yes, the evidence was obtained in unconventional ways. Yes, the witnesses have their own problems. But that doesn't make them wrong. That doesn't make the fraud any less real." The question you have to ask yourselves is simple. Do you believe Violet Ames and Jasper Colton risked everything, their freedom, their reputations, their lives, to fabricate an elaborate lie? Or do you believe they're imperfect people who saw injustice and tried to stop it the only way they could? Calloway's closing was shorter but more effective. He focused on reasonable doubt, on the questionable methods used to gather evidence, on the financial and personal motivations of the witnesses. He painted Marcus as the real victim, a man being destroyed by people with axes to grind. "The prosecution wants you to believe a fantastic story," Calloway said. "That a respected businessman with decades of experience suddenly turned criminal. That he somehow managed to fool everyone, his colleagues, his employees, government officials, while simultaneously running a massive fraud scheme. Does that make sense? Or is it more likely that two desperate criminals facing serious charges themselves invented this story to save themselves, to turn their own crimes into heroic actions?" He looked at each juror in turn. You don't have to like Marcus Ames. You don't have to think he's perfect. You just have to ask yourselves, has the prosecution proven their case beyond a reasonable doubt? With illegally obtained evidence? With testimony from confessed criminals and a disgraced ex-lawman? I don't think so, and I don't think you do either. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Jasper and Violet waited in Silver Creek, neither sleeping nor eating much, just existing in a state of suspended terror. The whole town seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for the verdict that would define what had happened here. On the afternoon of the second day, word came that the jury had reached a decision. The courtroom was even more packed than before, people fighting for seats, the air thick with anticipation. Jasper sat beside Violet at the prosecutor's table, both of them silent. Catherine Marsh looked tense but composed. Across the aisle, Marcus sat calm and confident. Judge Thornton entered and everyone stood. When they sat again, the judge looked at the jury foreman. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor." "On the charge of land fraud, how do you find the defendant?" The foreman stood, unfolding a piece of paper. In that moment before he spoke, Jasper felt time stretch out, felt the weight of everything that had led to this moment pressing down on him. "We find the defendant," the foreman paused, "not guilty." The courtroom exploded, people shouting, some in anger, some in triumph. Jasper felt Violet collapse beside him, a sound like a wounded animal escaping her throat. Across the aisle, Marcus smiled. Judge Thornton pounded his gavel, calling for order. It took several minutes for the noise to die down. On the charge of bribery of public officials, how do you find the defendant? Not guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud? Not guilty. 3 more charges, 3 more not guilty verdicts. By the end, Marcus Ames was completely exonerated on all counts. A free man. Judge Thornton dismissed the jury, and they filed out, some looking relieved, others uncomfortable. The courtroom slowly emptied until it was just the principals remaining: prosecutors, defense, the accused, the accusers. Marcus stood and buttoned his jacket, the gesture casual, unhurried. He looked at Violet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "I hope you're satisfied," he said quietly. "You've destroyed your own reputation, ruined this man's life, and accomplished nothing. Was it worth it?" Violet didn't answer. She just stared at him with hollow eyes. Marcus turned to leave, his lawyers gathering around him like a protective wall. But before he reached the door, Judge Thornton spoke. "Mr. Ames," Marcus turned. "Yes, Your Honor? You're free to go. The jury has spoken, and I respect their decision. But I want you to know something." Thornton's voice was hard. "I've been a judge for 30 years. I've seen guilty men walk free on technicalities, on procedural errors, on the skill of expensive lawyers. And I've seen innocent people punished for crimes they didn't commit. This case falls somewhere in that gray area, and it's going to haunt me." "I'm sure it will, Your Honor, but the law is the law." "The law is the law," Thornton agreed, "and it has spoken today. But justice, that's a different thing entirely, and I don't believe justice was served in this courtroom." Marcus's smile was cold. "Perhaps not. But it's the best we can do, isn't it? Good day, Your Honor." He left, and with him went whatever hope had sustained Jasper and Violet through the trial. They sat in the empty courtroom, neither speaking, while Catherine Marsh gathered her papers with tight, angry movements. "I'm sorry," Marsh said finally. "We did everything we could, but it wasn't enough. The illegally obtained evidence, the witness credibility issues, we were fighting uphill from the start." "What happens to us now?" Jasper asked. "The charges against you were contingent on securing a conviction against Ames. With him acquitted, the prosecutor's office has decided to proceed with reduced charges: misdemeanor trespass for the break-in, obstruction for the false statements to marshals, suspended sentences with probation. You'll both be free, but with criminal records." "And Griggs?" "He cooperated fully, so he'll get his immunity as promised, but he's finished as a land office clerk. He'll have to start over somewhere else." Marsh closed her briefcase. "If it's any consolation, you exposed real fraud even if we couldn't prove it in court. The Territorial Land Office is conducting audits of all Ames's transactions. They're finding irregularities. It won't put him in prison, but it'll damage his business, cost him money and reputation." "That's supposed to make us feel better?" Violet's voice was bitter. "He murdered his partner. He destroyed lives. He corrupted officials and stole from desperate families. And he walks away with a damaged reputation? I know it's not enough, but sometimes it's all we get." Marsh looked at them both with something like sympathy. "For what it's worth, I believe you. I believe everything you said about what Marcus Ames did. The jury just needed more than belief. They needed proof we couldn't give them." After she left, Jasper and Violet sat in the empty courtroom for a long time. Outside, they could hear the town returning to normal, the spectacle over, people moving on with their lives. "I was wrong," Violet said finally. "About what?" "The truth. I said it always matters, but it doesn't. We told the truth, and it changed nothing. Marcus is free. We're criminals with records. The victims still lost everything. What did the truth accomplish?" Jasper thought about that. About William Garrett walking free 3 years ago. About all the times he'd seen justice fail, seen the law twisted by those with money and power. It would be easy to agree with her, to accept that the truth didn't matter, that fighting was pointless. But he couldn't, because if the truth didn't matter, then nothing did, and he wasn't ready to accept that. "It matters because we told it," he said. "Because we stood up and said what happened, even knowing we'd probably lose. That matters." "Does it? Because from where I'm sitting, all we accomplished was making ourselves miserable." Maybe, but at least we tried. At least we fought. That's more than most people do. Violet looked at him with tears streaming down her face. I wanted him to pay. I wanted to watch him lose everything like he made me lose everything. And instead he gets to walk away while we're left with nothing. Jasper took her hand. We're not left with nothing. What do we have? Each other, the truth, our integrity, whatever that's worth. It's not worth much, apparently. Maybe not in a courtroom, but it's worth something to me. They left Centerville that evening and rode back to Silver Creek in silence. The town greeted them with mixed reactions, some sympathy, some judgment, some simple exhaustion with the whole affair. Sheriff Brennan told them they were welcome to stay, but suggested they might want to consider starting fresh elsewhere, where their names weren't associated with scandal. That night, sitting in the cabin that had become their refuge, Jasper and Violet finally faced the question they'd been avoiding. What happens now? Violet asked. I don't know. We're free, technically. Probation, but no jail time. We can go wherever we want. Together? The question hung between them. The fake marriage was over, exposed as the lie it had always been. They had no legal ties to each other, no obligations. They could walk away from each other and never look back. Do you want to stay together? Jasper asked. Violet looked at him in the dim lamplight. I don't know what I want anymore. I thought I wanted justice, wanted to see Marcus destroyed. Now that we've failed, I feel empty, like I don't know who I am without that purpose driving me. I know the feeling. Do you want me to stay? It was Jasper's turn to struggle with the answer. A month ago, his life had been simple, solitary, safe. Now it was complicated and messy and uncertain, but also richer somehow. More real. I think I do, he said. Not because we're pretending to be married, not because you owe me anything, just because I like having you around, like knowing I'm not alone. Violet smiled through her tears. That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. It's not a proposal, it's just, he struggled for words. An offer of partnership. We've been through hell together. Maybe we can figure out what comes after, together too. As what? Friends? Partners? Something else? I don't know. We'll figure it out as we go. Violet moved closer to him, and for the first time since they'd met, Jasper pulled her into a real embrace. Not for show, not to fool anyone, just because they both needed it. Okay, she said against his shoulder, let's figure it out together. Outside, Silver Creek settled into another night. The trial was over. Marcus Ames was free. Justice, by any conventional measure, had failed. But in the small cabin at the edge of town, two people who'd been strangers a month ago held each other and found something that courtrooms and juries couldn't provide. Not justice, not victory, just the knowledge that they'd fought for something worth fighting for, and that they hadn't fought alone. The knock came 3 weeks after the trial ended, on a morning when frost painted the windows white and Jasper was already at the forge, working out his frustration on a piece of iron that had done nothing to deserve it. He'd fallen back into the rhythms of his old life, heat and metal and silence, but it felt hollow now, like playing a part in a story that had already ended. He heard the horses first, then voices. When he stepped outside, he found Sheriff Brennan standing in the street with two men Jasper didn't recognize. Federal types from the look of them, wearing dark suits under their coats, their eyes taking in everything with the flat assessment of people used to finding trouble. Jasper, Brennan said, these gentlemen are from the Territorial Attorney General's office. They'd like a word. Jasper felt his stomach drop. About what? The older of the two men stepped forward. He was maybe 60, with white hair and a face mapped with wrinkles. My name is Daniel Warren. Daniel, I'm the lead investigator for the Territory's Anti-Corruption Task Force. We need to talk about Marcus Ames. They sat in the cabin, Jasper, Violet, Warren, and his younger partner who introduced himself as Robert Chen. Brennan had stayed outside, giving them privacy. Warren spread papers across the table, documents that looked official and dense with legal language. I'll get straight to it, Warren said. The trial was a disaster from a legal standpoint. Calloway picked apart every piece of evidence and the jury bought his story. But that doesn't mean we're done with Marcus Ames. He was acquitted on all charges, Violet said. Her voice was flat, drained of hope. Double jeopardy. You can't try him again. We can't try him for the same crimes, but we can investigate related crimes, and we can go after his associates, his network, the officials he's corrupted. Warren pulled out a ledger, not the one from Centerville, but something similar. After the trial, we started digging deeper, looking at transactions across the entire territory, and we found something interesting. He opened the ledger to a marked page. 3 months before Clayton Hayes was killed, he made a deposit to a safety deposit box at the Denver First National Bank. We obtained a warrant to open it last week. Warren pulled out a photograph and slid it across the table. It showed stacks of documents, neatly organized. Even from the photo, Jasper could see they were deeds, contracts, correspondence. Hayes kept insurance, Warren continued, complete records of every fraudulent transaction he and Marcus conducted over 5 years. Buyer names, property descriptions, falsified surveyor reports, bribe receipts, everything. And unlike the documents you obtained from Centerville, these were willingly given to us by Hayes's estate. Legally obtained, admissible in court. Violet leaned forward, something flickering in her eyes. You're saying you have proof? We're saying we have enough to bring new charges, not for the same land fraud cases tried in Centerville. Those are protected by the acquittal, but for dozens of other cases across the territory, cases Marcus thought were buried, cases where we can prove systematic, deliberate fraud. Why are you telling us this? Jasper asked. Warren looked at them both seriously. Because we want you to testify again, both of you. Your testimony was damaged in the first trial by Calloway's attacks on your credibility. But with Hayes's documents providing independent corroboration, your testimony becomes powerful. You're not just accusers anymore. You're witnesses who can contextualize the evidence, explain how the scheme worked, make it real for a jury. We already testified, Violet said. We already lost. Why would we put ourselves through that again? Because this time we'll win. Warren's voice was certain. This time we have the evidence to prove everything you said was true. This time, Marcus Ames doesn't walk free. Chen spoke up for the first time. We've also been investigating Clayton Hayes' murder. The official investigation was closed after Violet was charged, but we reopened it. We found a witness, a stable hand who saw a man matching the description of one of Marcus's known enforcers leaving Hayes' office the night he was killed. The witness was paid to keep quiet, but after the trial received enough attention, he came forward. We're building a murder case. Jasper felt something shift in his chest. Hope, maybe. Or just the memory of what hope used to feel like. When? He asked. The new trial is scheduled for March, 3 months from now. We'll need you both to return to Centerville to go through the evidence with us, to prepare testimony. Warren paused. I won't lie to you. It'll be hard. Calloway will still be there, still attacking your credibility. But this time the evidence will back you up. This time you won't be alone on the stand. Violet was quiet for a long time. Jasper could see her working through it, weighing the cost of going through another trial against the possibility of finally seeing Marcus pay for what he'd done. If we do this, she said finally, I want something in return. Name it. Harold Griggs got immunity for cooperating. I want the same deal for the families who lost money in Marcus's schemes. I want them compensated. I want their land claims restored. I want them made whole. Warren exchanged a glance with Chen. That's outside our authority. We can prosecute crimes, but we can't force restitution without a conviction. Then get a conviction and make it part of the sentencing. Marcus has money, properties, assets seized during the investigation. Use them to pay back the people he hurt. We can recommend that to the judge, but I can't promise, then recommend hard. Make it clear that any plea deal, any reduced sentence, it comes with full restitution. Violet's voice was steel. I didn't go through hell just to see Marcus in prison. I want the damage undone. I want the victims to get something back. Warren studied her, then nodded slowly. I'll do everything in my power to make that happen. You have my word. And what about us? Jasper asked. The criminal records, the probation. If you testify and we get a conviction, I'll personally recommend those charges be expunged. Reduced to nothing. You'll walk away clean. It was more than Jasper had dared hope for. He looked at Violet, trying to read her expression. What do you think? He asked. I think I'm tired of running, tired of losing, tired of watching bad people win. She looked at Warren. When do we start? They spent the next 3 months preparing. Warren and Chen became fixtures in Silver Creek, working with them to organize testimony, to connect the dots between Hayes's documents and the fraud scheme Violet had described. It was exhausting work, reliving everything they'd been through, but this time it felt different. This time they weren't alone. The new evidence painted a picture so clear even Calloway would struggle to obscure it. Hayes had documented everything, not just the fraudulent deeds, but the bribes paid to officials, the fake identities created for buyers, even transcripts of conversations with Marcus discussing how to cover their tracks. It was a prosecutor's dream, but the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. In late January, a man named Thomas Garrett showed up in Silver Creek asking for Jasper. He was in his 30s, well-dressed, with the kind of nervous energy that suggested he was working up courage to do something difficult. "You probably don't remember me," Garrett said when they met, "but 3 years ago you arrested my father, William Garrett, for murder." Jasper felt old anger stirring. "I remember. He was guilty. You knew it. I knew it. Everyone knew it. But he had money and connections and he walked free." Thomas looked at his hands. "He died 6 months ago, heart attack, and before he died he told me everything. About the killing, about bribing the judge, about destroying your career when you wouldn't back down." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I read about your trial. About Marcus Ames walking free the same way my father did. About you trying to fight corruption and getting crushed for it." Thomas pulled out an envelope. "My father kept records too. Insurance, he called it. Evidence of the bribes, the fixed trial, the threats made against you. I want you to have them. I want people to know the truth about what happened to you." Jasper took the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were bank statements showing payments to Judge Morrison, correspondence between William Garrett and his lawyer discussing how to discredit Jasper, even a confession of sorts, written shortly before William's death, laying out exactly what he'd done and how he'd gotten away with it. "I can't bring your career back," Thomas said. "Can't undo the damage. But maybe this helps people understand why you did what you did, why you helped that woman. You weren't a vigilante or a criminal. You were someone who'd been failed by the system trying to make sure it didn't fail someone else." After Thomas left, Jasper sat with the documents for a long time. Violet found him there, the papers spread across the table, his face unreadable. "What is all this?" she asked. He told her. About William Garrett, about the fixed trial, about everything that had driven him to Silver Creek in the first place. Violet listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she put her hand over his. "You were right," she said, "about fighting even when it seems hopeless, about standing up even when you know you'll probably lose. You did that 3 years ago, and it destroyed you. But you did it again anyway, for me, for people you didn't even know. And look where it got us, criminal records and a man who walked free. Maybe. But now we have another chance. And this time we have the evidence. This time we might actually win." She squeezed his hand. "And even if we don't, at least we tried. At least we didn't give up just because the first fight didn't go our way." The second trial began on a cold March morning. The courthouse was packed again, but the atmosphere was different. News had leaked about Hayes's documents, about the new evidence. People who'd dismissed the first trial as a frame-up were paying attention now. Marcus looked older this time, some of his confidence gone. Calloway was still there, still sharp, but even he seemed to sense the ground had shifted. Catherine Marsh presented the case methodically, building from Hayes's documents outward. She showed the jury deed after deed after deed, all following the same pattern, all signed off on by the same fake surveyors, all processed by the same corrupted officials. She presented the bribes in Hayes's handwriting, the conversations documented in his notes, the systematic nature of the fraud. When she called Violet to testify, Calloway tried the same attacks as before. But this time, when he questioned her credibility, Marsh countered with documents in Hayes's own hand confirming everything Violet had said. When he suggested she was lying about discovering the fraud, she produced notes Hayes had written about working with her to build their case. Every attack Calloway made was met with hard evidence that supported Violet's version of events. Jasper's testimony was similarly bolstered. When Calloway tried to paint him as a disgraced lawman with an agenda, Marsh introduced Thomas Garrett's documents showing how Jasper had been railroaded by the same kind of corruption he was trying to expose now. The parallel was stark. A man who'd tried to uphold the law being destroyed by those who corrupted it, then trying again years later despite knowing the personal cost. The jury heard from the families whose lives had been destroyed by Marcus's schemes, a farmer who'd lost everything buying land that turned out to belong to someone else, a widow who'd invested her late husband's insurance payout in property that never existed, a young couple who'd been driven off land they'd legitimately purchased because Marcus had sold it to 3 other buyers at the same time. And they heard from Harold Griggs again, this time with Hayes's documents confirming every bribe he'd described, every fake deed he'd filed. Calloway tried to discredit him, but the evidence was overwhelming. The murder charge was harder to prove. The witness who'd seen Marcus's enforcer was credible, but not definitive. The enforcer himself had disappeared, probably fled the territory once the investigation started. But Marsh built a circumstantial case. Hayes had told Violet he was gathering evidence against Marcus. Days later, he was dead. The safe deposit box had been opened the day before his murder, suggesting he'd just added the final pieces of his insurance policy. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. Calloway fought hard. He attacked every piece of evidence, every witness, every connection Marsh tried to make. But this time the foundation was solid. This time the prosecution's case wasn't built on stolen ledgers and coerced testimony. It was built on evidence provided willingly by a dead man who'd known he might not survive his partnership with Marcus Ames. The closing arguments took a full day. Calloway gave it everything he had, but even he couldn't explain away Hayes's documents. The best he could do was suggest that Hayes had been the real mastermind and Marcus was just a dupe who'd trusted the wrong partner. The jury didn't buy it. They deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, Jasper and Violet sat at the prosecutor's table holding hands under the table where no one could see. The foreman stood with the verdict sheet. On the count of conspiracy to commit land fraud, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. Violet's grip on Jasper's hand tightened. On the count of bribery of public officials? Guilty. On the count of wire fraud? Guilty. Charge after charge, guilty verdicts. By the time they reached the murder charge, Jasper had lost count. The foreman's voice was steady. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder in the death of Clayton Hayes, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. The courtroom erupted. People cheering, crying, shouting. Marcus sat frozen at the defense table, his face gray. Calloway was already preparing appeals motions, but even he had to know this was different. This wasn't a technicality or a procedural error. This was a jury looking at overwhelming evidence and calling it what it was. Judge Thornton gavelled for order. When the noise died down, he looked at Marcus with an expression of grim satisfaction. Mr. Ames, you've been found guilty on 17 counts of fraud, conspiracy, and murder. Sentencing will take place in 2 weeks. Until then, you're remanded to custody without bail. Marshals. They led Marcus away in chains. He didn't look at Violet as he passed, didn't acknowledge her at all. Just walked out of the courtroom a convicted felon, the empire he'd built with lies and corruption crumbling around him. Outside the courthouse, Catherine Marsh found them standing in the cold spring air, both of them too stunned to move. You did it, she said. You actually did it. We all did it, Violet said. You, Warren, Chen, everyone who didn't give up after the first trial. But you started it. You were the one who had the courage to speak up in the first place. Everything else came from that. Marsh smiled. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you both. Warren appeared with good news. The judge is prepared to make restitution a condition of any potential appeals or reduced sentencing. Marcus's assets will be frozen and used to compensate the victims. It won't make everyone whole, but it's something. How much time is he looking at? Jasper asked. On these charges? 20 to 30 years minimum, and given his age, that's likely a life sentence. That night, back in Silver Creek for what would be the last time, Jasper and Violet sat in the cabin that had been their refuge and prison, their sanctuary and their cage. The fire was dying in the hearth, and neither of them moved to rebuild it. I thought I'd feel different, Violet said. When he was convicted, thought I'd feel, I don't know, triumphant, vindicated, something. What do you feel? Tired, empty, like I spent so much energy hating him and fighting him That I don't know what to do now that it's over. She looked at Jasper. Is that normal? I think so. I felt the same way after William Garrett died. All that anger with nowhere to go. How did you move past it? I didn't. Not really. I just buried it and pretended I had. Jasper poked at the dying fire. But maybe that was the wrong approach. Maybe moving past it means actually dealing with it instead of running from it. So what do we do now? It was the question they'd been dancing around for weeks. The trial was over. The charges against them would be expunged. They were free to go wherever they wanted, do whatever they wanted. They had no obligations to each other, no ties beyond what they chose to maintain. I've been thinking about that, Jasper said, about what I want. What I actually want, not just what I thought I was supposed to want. And? I don't want to be a blacksmith anymore. Don't want to hide in a small town pretending to be someone I'm not. I spent 3 years doing that, and it didn't make me happy. It just made me numb. What do you want to be? Jasper thought about that. About who he'd been before everything went wrong. About the deputy who'd believed in protecting people, and standing between the innocent and those who'd hurt them. I want to help people. People like you, like the families Marcus hurt. People who get crushed by systems that are supposed to protect them. He looked at her. Warren mentioned his anti-corruption task force is expanding, looking for investigators with law enforcement experience who aren't afraid to challenge authority. Violet's eyes widened. You're thinking of joining them? I'm thinking it's work that matters, work that needs doing, and maybe I've got skills that could be useful. He paused. They're also looking for people who understand how fraud works from the inside, people who know the patterns, the tells, the ways bad actors hide their crimes. People like me. People exactly like you. Violet was quiet, processing this. You're asking me to keep fighting, to keep putting myself in danger, keep reliving trauma, keep facing down people like Marcus. I'm asking if you want to, because if you don't, that's fine. You've done more than enough. You've earned the right to walk away, to start fresh somewhere quiet where no one knows your name. I'll support whatever you choose. And if I choose to keep fighting, then we do it together, as partners. No more lies about being married, no more pretending. Just two people who went through hell and decided that maybe, just maybe, they could turn that experience into something that helps others. Violet stood and walked to the window, looking out at Silver Creek sleeping in the darkness. Jasper watched her, this woman who'd stumbled into his life desperate and terrified, and somehow changed everything. I spent 2 years working for Marcus, she said quietly. 2 years processing his fraudulent documents, taking his money, being complicit in his schemes even after I knew what he was doing. I told myself I was gathering evidence, building a case. But the truth is I was scared, scared of what would happen if I spoke up, scared of being alone, scared of losing the only stability I had. That's understandable. Let me finish. She turned to face him. I was scared, and I let that fear control me. Let it keep me quiet when I should have spoken. Let it make me complicit in hurting people. And when I finally did speak up, when I finally found the courage to do the right thing, everything fell apart exactly like I'd feared it would. I lost everything, became a fugitive, nearly got killed. Violet, but I also found something I didn't expect. I found that even when everything falls apart, even when you lose everything, you can still survive. You can still fight. You can still matter. She smiled, and there were tears in her eyes. You showed me that. You risked everything for a stranger because it was the right thing to do, even though you'd already learned that doing the right thing can destroy you. You taught me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being terrified and doing it anyway. Jasper stood and moved to her. So is that a yes? That's a yes. I want to keep fighting. I want to help people who are where I was, trapped in impossible situations, convinced they're powerless, too scared to act. I want to be the person who shows them they're not alone, that speaking up is possible, that justice, real justice, is worth fighting for even when it seems hopeless. It won't be easy. We'll face situations like this again. People like Marcus who have all the power and all the advantages. We'll lose sometimes, maybe lose often. I know, but we'll also win sometimes, like we did this time. And every person we help, every corrupt official we expose, every victim we get justice for, that's something real, Something that matters. She took his hand. I'm tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of letting fear make my decisions. I want to fight, and I want to fight with you. They stood there in the dying firelight, two people who'd been broken by the same corrupt system, who'd found each other by accident and somehow built something real from lies and desperation. Partners, then, Jasper said. Partners, Violet agreed. They left Silver Creek a week later. The town gave them a quiet send-off. Martha Hendricks with more food than two people could possibly eat. Sheriff Brennan with a handshake and a nod that conveyed more respect than words could. Even some of the people who doubted them coming by to wish them well. The smithy stood empty, the forge cold. Someone else would take it over eventually, would heat the metal and shape it into tools and horseshoes and all the practical things a frontier town needed. But Jasper didn't look back as they rode away. That part of his life was over. They headed east toward the territorial capital, toward the anti-corruption task force and the work Warren had promised them, toward a future that was uncertain and probably difficult, but at least was theirs to choose. Do you think we'll make a difference? Violet asked as Silver Creek disappeared behind the hills. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But I think trying to make a difference is enough. It has to be. Even when we fail? Especially when we fail. Because the failures teach us how to win the next time. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the spring sun warm on their backs. Jasper thought about everything that had happened since that first gunshot had shattered the quiet of Silver Creek, about the lies they'd told and the truths they'd uncovered, about the cost of fighting and the cost of not fighting. In the end, he thought, it came down to a simple choice. You could accept that the world was broken and do nothing, or you could accept that the world was broken and try to fix it anyway. The first option was safer, easier, less painful. But the second option was the only one that mattered. Hey, Jasper, Violet said, breaking into his thoughts. Yeah? Thank you for everything, for lying to those marshals, for risking your life, for not giving up even when I wanted to, for showing me what courage actually looks like. You did the same for me, reminded me who I used to be, who I could be again. So we saved each other. Something like that. Violet smiled. That's a better story than the fake marriage anyway. Much better. They rode on toward whatever came next, two imperfect people who'd learned that sometimes the right thing to do was also the hardest thing to do, and that doing it anyway was what separated the living from the merely surviving. The world was still broken, still corrupt, still weighted in favor of those with money and power, but they'd proven that it could be fought. That even when you lost the first battle, even when the system failed you, you could get back up and try again. And sometimes, if you were lucky and brave and refused to quit, you could actually win. 6 months later, Jasper sat in a small office in the territorial capital reading through case files. The anti-corruption task force had given him and Violet a trial run on a relatively simple case, a county clerk suspected of selling building permits. It wasn't the dramatic confrontation of the Marcus Ames trial, but it was work that mattered, work that would help people. Violet came in carrying coffee and her own stack of files. She'd cut her hair shorter, looked healthier than she had in Silver Creek. The haunted look had faded from her eyes, replaced by something harder and more determined. Found something interesting, she said, spreading documents across his desk. The clerk's using the same pattern Marcus used. Duplicate permits for the same addresses, small variations in the property descriptions. It's subtle, but it's there. Jasper studied the documents, seeing the pattern emerge. We can prove this. Build a case that'll hold up in court. We can? And we will. Violet smiled. Another small victory. They add up. Yeah, they do. A knock at the door interrupted them. Warren stuck his head in, his expression serious. Got something for you two. Bigger case, more complicated, might be dangerous. Jasper and Violet exchanged a glance. 6 months ago, they would have hesitated, would have weighed the risks, would have been afraid. Now they just nodded. Tell us about it, Violet said. Warren laid out the case: political corruption, bribery, possibly ties to organized crime. The kind of case that could get people killed if they weren't careful. The kind of case that most investigators would avoid if they had any sense. You interested? Warren asked when he finished. Jasper looked at Violet. She looked back at him with eyes that had seen the worst the world could offer and decided to keep fighting anyway. "We're interested," they said together, because that's what they did now. They fought. They lost sometimes and won sometimes and kept getting back up regardless. They stood between the powerful and the powerless, between corruption and justice, between the lie that the system couldn't be challenged and the truth that it could. It wasn't the ending Jasper had imagined when Violet first stumbled into Silver Creek. It wasn't neat or tidy or perfectly resolved. There were still scars, still doubts, still nights when the weight of it all felt like too much. But it was real. It was honest. It was a life built on truth instead of lies, on courage instead of fear, on the belief that even broken people could do something that mattered. And in the end, that was enough. The world didn't get fixed by grand gestures or perfect heroes. It got fixed by imperfect people doing difficult things because they needed to be done, by people who'd been knocked down learning how to stand back up, by small victories that added up over time into something larger. Silver Creek faded into memory, but the lessons learned there stayed with them. The lesson that authority without integrity was worthless, that the law and justice weren't always the same thing, that sometimes lying was the only way to protect the truth, that fighting was worth it even when you lost, because not fighting meant letting the bad guys win by default. Jasper Colton and Violet Ames became good at their jobs. They built cases, exposed corruption, helped victims find justice. They failed sometimes, lost cases they should have won, watched guilty people walk free. But they kept trying, kept fighting, kept believing that the work mattered, and every person they helped, every corrupt official they brought down, every small victory they claimed. It was proof that the gunshot that shattered the silence of Silver Creek that day hadn't just changed 2 lives. It had started something bigger. Something that couldn't be stopped by expensive lawyers or corrupt officials or the weight of a broken system. It had started a fight. And some fights, once started, never really end. They just find new champions willing to pick up the torch and carry it forward. This was their torch now. And they carried it together. 2 people bound not by a fake marriage certificate, but by something stronger, shared purpose, mutual respect, and the knowledge that they'd looked into the darkness and chosen to light a candle instead of cursing the shadows. The story that began with a desperate woman and a lie told to save her didn't end with a trial or a conviction. It ended with a choice to keep fighting, to keep believing, to keep insisting that justice mattered even when the world seemed determined to prove otherwise. And that choice, made every day by imperfect people trying to do better, was what actually changed things in the end. Not perfection, not certainty, not even victory all the time. Just the stubborn refusal to quit, just the courage to try again, just the belief that standing up mattered even when you stood alone, and the knowledge that sometimes, if you were lucky, you didn't have to stand alone at all.